At Christmas dinner, I overheard my parents planning to move my sister's family into my $400,000 condo for free. I smiled and stayed quiet. I let them pack and brag, and then I sold it and vanished. 80 missed calls later. They are still wondering what hit them. My name is Zola, and at 35 years old, I am a forensic accountant in Chicago, which means I catch people lying about money for a living. I should have known my own family was the biggest fraud case of my life. If you have ever been the bank for a family that does not respect you, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe because I am about to show you exactly how to audit a toxic family out of your life. The water in the sink was lukewarm and greasy, turning a murky gray as I scrubbed the remains of the glazed ham and collard greens off my mother's good china. The sounds of laughter and clinking glasses drifted in from the living room. My sister Jasmine was recounting a story about her latest failed attempt at being an influencer, while my parents hung on her every word. I looked down at my hands, the skin wrinkling from the water. I had paid for the entire dinner. I had brought the $300 bottle of wine they were drinking. I had even surprised my parents with an all-expenses-paid anniversary cruise earlier that morning. But here I was, the one in the kitchen cleaning up while they celebrated being the perfect family. I turned off the faucet to let the water drain, and that is when I heard it. My mother, Beatrice. Her voice lowered, but carrying that sharp edge of authority she always used when she was plotting something. "Do not worry about the rent, Jasmine," she was saying. "Zola is hardly ever at that condo anyway. She works 80 hours a week. The place is just gathering dust. It has 2 bedrooms and a view of Lake Michigan. It is wasteful for one person to live like that. I will talk to her tonight. She will listen to me." My stomach dropped, but I did not move. I stood frozen with a dish rag in my hand, straining to hear the rest. Then I heard Kyle, my brother-in-law. His voice always grated on me, a mixture of unearned confidence and entitlement. "I think Zola will agree if you phrase it right," he said. "We really need the space, Bia. Our apartment is cramping my style. I need a dedicated studio for my new venture. Plus Zola has terrible taste. We would have to get rid of that stiff leather furniture and paint over those gray walls. I can already see the potential once we clear her stuff out." I felt a cold chill run down my spine. They were not just asking for help. They were carving up my life, discussing my home as if I were already dead and gone. Kyle, a man who had not held a steady job in 4 years, was planning to throw out my Italian leather sofa that I had saved 6 months to buy. My mother was offering up my sanctuary, my hard-earned peace as a free housing solution for her golden child. I dried my hands slowly, deliberately. The old Zola, the one who desperately wanted their approval, would have stormed in there crying, asking how they could be so cruel. But that Zola died the moment I heard Kyle say, "Clear her stuff out." I smoothed down my dress, checked my reflection in the microwave door, and walked out into the living room, with a smile that did not reach my eyes. "Dessert time," I announced, my voice steady. Everyone looked up, beaming. My father, Otis, was already pouring another glass of the expensive wine I had bought. "Ah, Zola, there you are," he said jovially. "Come sit down, baby girl. We were just talking about how proud we are of you, proud of my bank account." Maybe I sat down at the lavishly set table watching them. My mother cut a slice of sweet potato pie and placed it in front of me with a smile that I now recognized as the same one a predator gives before pouncing. "So, Zola." My father started clearing his throat, looking at my mother for a cue. "We have been discussing the family situation. You know Kyle has been going through a transition period with his career and your sister needs support. Here it comes." I thought, taking a slow sip of water. "We think it would be best for the family if you let Jasmine and Kyle stay in your condo for a while," my father said. "The lease on their apartment is up, and they need to save money for Kyle's new business launch. It would just be for a year or two until they get on their feet." "A year or two?" He said it so casually, as if he were asking to borrow a cup of sugar. "And where would I live?" I asked, my tone conversational. My mother waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, Zola, you can come back here. Your old room is exactly how you left it. Or you can rent a small studio closer to your office. You are single. You do not need all that space and luxury. It is selfish, really, to hoard a two-bedroom condo in the city when your sister is trying to build a family. You are never there anyway." Selfish. The word hung in the air, heavy and toxic. I looked at Jasmine, who was refusing to meet my eyes, pretending to be fascinated by her pie. Then I looked at Kyle, who was leaning back in his chair with a smirk, already mentally measuring my living room for his imaginary studio. "You want me to move out of the home? I own the home. I pay a mortgage on so my sister and her husband can live there, rent-free," I clarified. "It is not rent-free, it is family," my mother snapped. "Do not make this about money, Zola. You always make everything about money just because you have it. You have been blessed, and it is your duty to share those blessings. Kyle just needs a break. He is a visionary, just like you were at his age." I almost laughed. A visionary. Kyle was a 32-year-old man who had been fired from 3 jobs in 2 years for incompetence. I remembered 10 years ago, when I was accepted into the accounting program at the University of Illinois. I had asked my parents to co-sign a student loan, just a signature, not even money. They had refused, saying they could not risk their credit, but a year later they sold a plot of land my grandmother left them to pay for Jasmine to go to an unaccredited art school in New York, which she dropped out of after 1 semester because the vibes were off. I looked at my father, hoping to see some hesitation, but he just nodded along with my mother. "You are 35, Zola. It is time you stepped up for your sister. Besides, what do you need a view of the lake for? You are always buried in spreadsheets." The disrespect was absolute. They did not see me as a person, they saw me as a resource, a checking account with a pulse. They were not asking, they were telling, expecting me to fold like I always did, expecting me to crave their validation enough to sacrifice my own comfort. I took a deep breath and let the silence stretch just long enough to make them uncomfortable. Then I smiled. It was the sharpest, coldest smile I had ever worn. "You are right," I said. The tension in the room broke instantly. Jasmine let out a breath she had been holding, and Kyle high-fived my father. "I have been working too much." I continued, my voice smooth like ice. "I have actually been thinking about a change myself. Maybe this is the sign I needed." My mother clapped her hands together. "I knew you would understand, Zola. I told them. You would do the right thing. We can start moving their things next weekend. You can stay in the guest room here until you find a rental." Kyle chimed in. "Yeah, thanks, Zola. I really appreciate it. I am going to need to change the locks, though, just for security. You know, with all my equipment for the startup. And that second bedroom, we are going to turn that into a content room for Jasmine." They were already moving in, erasure complete. They did not even thank me properly, just immediately pivoted to logistics and renovations, on a property they did not own. I watched them celebrate, pouring more of my wine, laughing about how great the new year was going to be. Under the table, I pulled out my phone and opened my contacts. I scrolled down to a name I had not texted in 2 years, Marcus, a real estate investor who had been trying to buy into my building for months. I typed a message without looking down, keeping my eyes on my family who were currently discussing which of my paintings to throw away. Message read, "I am ready to sell the condo. Everything included, fast close. Cash offer only. I need it done by January 15th. I hit send and put the phone back in my lap. "So, when can we get the keys?" Jasmine asked, her eyes shining with greed. "Soon," I said, picking up my wine glass. "I just need to pack a few personal things. You guys can have the rest." "Happy Christmas," my mother beamed, raising her glass. "To family. Helping family. To family," I echoed, knowing that by the time they realized what I had done, there would be no family left to toast. I took a sip of wine and savored the taste. It was a $200 bottle, but the taste of the revenge I was about to serve was going to be priceless. The next morning, I woke up in my childhood bedroom, the one my mother had so generously offered as my replacement home. The walls were still painted the same suffocating shade of beige my mother loved. I could hear them downstairs in the kitchen talking loudly over breakfast. I honestly think we should turn Zola's office into a nursery. Eventually, I heard Jasmine say, if Kyle's business takes off, we might want to start trying for a baby soon, and that condo is in the best school district. My mother hummed in agreement. It is perfect. The layout is great. Zola never knew how to decorate it anyway. It was so cold, so sterile. You will bring some life into it. I lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling a calm sort of rage settle over me. They were not just taking my home, they were erasing my existence, replacing my hard-earned success with their fantasies. But they had made one fatal mistake. They forgot what I did for a living. I was a forensic accountant. I tracked hidden assets. I found money that people tried to bury, and I knew how to dig up dirt. I got out of bed, dressed quickly, and went. Downstairs, Kyle was sitting at the table eating bacon like he owned the place. Good morning, roomie? He grinned with a mouth full of food. Hey, thanks again for the condo. I was thinking since you are moving out, maybe you could leave that big TV in the living room. It would be a hassle to move it, and it fits the wall perfectly. I poured myself coffee, my hands steady. Sure, Kyle, I said. Whatever helps you create. I spent the rest of the morning playing the part of the compliant daughter. I nodded as my mother listed off the things I needed to pack. I smiled as Jasmine talked about paint colors. But while they were distracted planning their takeover, I went to my father's home office. I told them I needed to print a work document. My father, who could barely turn on a computer, waved me in. I sat at his desk and started digging. It did not take long to find what I was looking for. My parents were disorganized, leaving bank statements and letters in unlocked drawers. I found a letter from a collection agency, addressed to Kyle, hidden under a stack of magazines. It was a final notice for $50,000 in gambling debt. So much for the startup. I took a picture of it. Then I logged into the family shared computer. My mother never logged out of her email. I searched for my name, and there it was. An email chain from a credit card company regarding a card ending in 4589. A card. I did not recognize open in my name 3 years ago with a balance of $20,000. My heart hammered against my ribs. My parents had stolen my identity. They had used my social security number to open a credit card, maxed it out, and were making minimum payments to keep it hidden. I scrolled through the statements: designer bags for Jasmine, golf clubs for my father, spa weekends for my mother. They were not just moochers, they were thieves. I downloaded every statement, every email, every proof of their fraud. I sent it all to my encrypted work cloud. Then I cleared the browser history and stood up, walked back into the kitchen where my family was laughing, discussing how they were going to rearrange my life. I looked at them, and for the first time I did not see my parents or my sister. I saw targets. So Zola, my mother said, wiping her hands on a towel. When are you going back to the city to start packing? We want to get the keys as soon as possible. I am heading back now, I said, picking up my purse. I have a lot of work to do. You have no idea, I thought. As I drove back to Chicago, the city skyline rising in the distance, I made a phone call. Marcus answered on the second ring. Zola, I got your text. Are you serious? Dead serious, I said. I want to sell. The unit is yours, fully furnished. I want a 30-day escrow, but I need a rent-back agreement for 2 weeks. I need to be out by the 15th. Done, Marcus said. I will have the paperwork drawn up by tomorrow morning. Why the rush? I am relocating, I said, watching the road stretch out before me. A permanent relocation. I hung up and turned up the radio. The plan was in motion. They wanted my house. They could have it. Or rather, they could have the lesson that came with it. I was going to let them believe they had won, right up until the moment I pulled the rug out from under them. The next few weeks were going to be a masterclass in deception, and I was an excellent student. The silence in the dining room was heavy, thick enough to choke on, even though the air smelled like cinnamon and nutmeg from the sweet potato pie my mother had just served. My father. Otis cleared his throat, a sound that usually signaled he was about to deliver a sermon or bad news. He pushed his half-eaten dessert away and clasped his hands on the table, looking everywhere but at me. "Zola, baby." He started, his voice rumbling with a forced casualness. "We need to talk about logistics. You know Kyle is in a transition period right now. He is pivoting." Pivoting, I thought. That was a generous way to describe getting fired for embezzlement and racking up gambling debts, but I kept my face smooth, unreadable, like a fresh spreadsheet. "He is launching a tech incubator." My father continued reciting the script I knew my mother had written for him. "But startups take capital, and overhead is a killer. They need to cut costs drastically if this is going to work." I took a slow sip of wine, letting the expensive vintage coat my tongue. I waited. I wanted them to say it. I wanted them to put the audacity into words. "Your mother and I have been thinking," he said, finally glancing at Beatrice for support. "Since you are so busy with the firm and you are hardly ever home, we think it makes sense for you to let Jasmine and Kyle take over your condo for a while, just for a year or two, until the business takes off." There it was, the ask. The demand really wrapped in the guise of family obligation. They wanted my sanctuary, my two-bedroom haven in the Gold Coast with the floor-to-ceiling windows and the marble countertops I had bled for. They wanted to hand it over to my sister, who had never had finished a project in her life, and her husband, who thought crypto was a personality trait. I set my wine glass down with a soft click. The sound echoed in the quiet room. "And where exactly would I live?" I asked, my voice level calm. "My mother." Beatrice let out a sharp breath as if my question was an insult. She leaned forward, the diamonds I had bought her for her 60th birthday glittering on her ears. "Oh, Zola, do not be difficult," she snapped. "You can come back here. Your old room is exactly how you left it. Or if you want your privacy, you can rent a little studio in the suburbs, closer to the train. You are single. You have no children. You do not need all that space. It is indulgent, really. Keeping a two-bedroom apartment to yourself when your sister is trying to build a future. Indulgent." The word felt like a slap. My mother looked at me with that familiar mix of disappointment and entitlement. In her eyes, my success was only valuable if it could be strip-mined to support Jasmine. I looked at Kyle. He was picking his teeth with a fingernail, looking bored. He did not even have the decency to ask me himself. He let my parents do the dirty work while he mentally rearranged my furniture. "You want me to move into a studio so they can live in my luxury condo, rent-free," I clarified, just to see if they would flinch. "It is not rent-free, it is an investment in family," Kyle said, speaking up for the first time with a smug grin. "And hey, I will take care of the place. You know I am handy. I can fix things up." I almost laughed. The only thing Kyle knew how to fix was a parlay on a sports betting app. My mother cut in her voice, taking on that martyr tone she perfected years ago. "It is your responsibility as the big sister. Zola, you have been blessed. You have the high-paying job, the fancy degree, the connections. Jasmine needs a leg up. You cannot just hoard your success while your flesh and blood struggles. It is ugly, Zola. It is unchristian. Blessed." She called it blessed. I called it 80-hour weeks staring at financial records until my eyes burned. I called it missed birthdays and lonely nights, and the relentless pressure to be twice as good to get half as much. But as she spoke, a memory clawed its way up from the back of my mind. A memory from 15 years ago, vivid and sharp as broken glass. I was 20 years old, sitting at this very kitchen table, begging them to co-sign a student loan for my accounting degree. I did not need their money, I just needed their credit history. I had a scholarship that covered tuition, but I needed loans for housing and books. I remember my father's face turned away in shame, and my mother's cold, hard stare. "We cannot risk our credit for this, Zola," she had said. "Art school maybe, or something creative, but accounting. You are not good with numbers, you will drop out, and we will be stuck with the bill. We have to protect our retirement." I had cried that night, feeling the weight of their lack of faith crushing me. I worked 3 jobs to pay for that degree. I ate instant noodles and slept 4 hours a night. I graduated top of my class without a single cent of help from them, but 6 months after they denied me, they sold a plot of land in Georgia that my grandmother had left them. It was supposed to be the family nest egg. They sold it for $50,000 and handed every penny to Jasmine. She wanted to be an actress. She moved to Los Angeles, got headshots, rented a villa in the hills, and threw parties. The money was gone in 8 months. She came home with nothing but a tan and a fake Prada bag. My parents never said a word about waste or risk. They just welcomed her back with open arms and blamed the industry for not recognizing her talent. And now, 15 years later, they were asking me to bankroll her life again. They were asking me to sacrifice the home I built, the symbol of my survival, so Jasmine could play house with a con artist. I looked at Jasmine. She was avoiding my gaze, tracing the pattern on the tablecloth. She knew this was wrong. She had to. No, but she was weak. She had been coddled into incompetence, and she would take what was given to her even if it was stolen from me. My mother mistook my silence for hesitation. She reached across the table and patted my hand, her touch cold and dry. "It is the right thing to do, Zola," she said, her voice softening into a manipulation tactic. "Think of how happy you will make us. Think of the family. We need this win. And honestly, what do you even do in that big apartment all alone? It must be lonely." Lonely. I was never lonely in my apartment. I was free, but they would never understand that. To them, a woman without a husband and kids was a failure, no matter how many zeros were in her bank account. I looked at my father, hoping for a flicker of defense, a sign that he remembered how hard I worked, but he just nodded along with Beatrice, a puppet with cut strings. "You are right," I said. The words tasted like ash, but I forced them out. My mother's eyes widened. "You agree I do," I said, leaning back in my chair and crossing my arms. "You are completely right. I am never there. Actually, I have been meaning to tell you guys something." I paused, letting the anticipation build. I summoned every ounce of my forensic training, keeping my face open and honest, while my mind sharpened into a weapon. "I am being transferred," I lied. The lie came easily, smooth and undetectable. "My firm is opening a new branch in London. They want me to head up the forensic division over there. It is a 2-year contract. Huge pay bump. I will be traveling constantly. Paris, Zurich, Dubai. I will practically be living in hotels." The room erupted. Beatrice shrieked with delight, clutching her chest. Otis let out a relieved breath that sounded like a tire deflating. Jasmine finally looked up, a greedy smile spreading across her face. "London," Kyle exclaimed, sitting up straighter. "That is huge, Zola. Congrats." "So the condo is definitely empty then?" "Completely empty," I said, smiling at him. "It would be stupid to leave it sitting there while I am across the ocean. It makes perfect sense for you guys to stay there. You can watch over it for me. Keep the pipes from freezing water. The plants." My mother beamed, looking around the table like she had single-handedly orchestrated world peace. "See? I told you she would understand. Zola has always been sensible." "London? That is wonderful. You can send us money for the upkeep too, since you will be making so much." I ignored the dig about the money. I just kept smiling, that frozen mask-like smile. "Of course," I said. "I leave in 3 weeks, January 15th. So you guys can move in right after that." 3 weeks? Jasmine squealed, clapping her hands. "That is perfect. That gives us time to pack." "Oh, Zola, thank you." I am going to paint the second bedroom pink for the baby we are planning, and we can host the Super Bowl party there. The view is going to be amazing for Instagram. They were already erasing me. They were painting over my walls, spending my money, inviting people into my space. They did not ask about my move or my new job, or if I was scared to go to a new country alone. They just saw an open door, and they were stampeding through it. Great, Kyle said, already pulling out his phone probably to text his bookie. I will start organizing the movers. We can get a truck for the 14th. That works, I said. You guys can come by and get the keys on the morning of the 15th. I will leave them under the mat. I have an early flight, so I will be gone before you get there. My mother raised her glass, her face flushed with the intoxication of getting her way. To Zola, she announced, for finally stepping up and doing her duty. To family, I repeated, raising my glass. I drank the wine and it tasted like victory. Not the warm, fuzzy kind, but the cold, hard kind that comes from knowing you are about to destroy your enemies. They thought they had won. They thought they had bullied me into submission, just like they always did. They saw a compliant daughter, a doormat with a checkbook. They had no idea they were sitting across from an executioner. I let them talk. I let them plan. Beatrice started listing off which of my furniture she wanted to replace, calling my taste cold and corporate. Otis talked about how he could finally come into the city and have a place to crash after baseball games. Jasmine and Kyle argued playfully about where to put his gaming setup. I sat there and nodded, answering their questions with vague affirmations, all while my mind was racing with the real plan. There was no job in London. There was no transfer. There was only a sale contract waiting to be drafted, and a one-way ticket to a beach where nobody knew my name. I looked at the grandfather clock in the corner. It was 8 p.m. The real estate offices were closed, but I knew Marcus would be awake. He was a shark, just like me. I excused myself from the table, claiming I needed to use the restroom. I walked down the hallway past the family photos that lined the wall. I was in almost all of them, usually in the background or off to the side, while Jasmine was front and center. In my graduation photo, my parents were looking away, talking to someone else. In the picture from my 30th birthday, they were not even there. I went into the bathroom and locked the door. I turned on the faucet to mask the sound of my voice. Then I pulled out my phone. I sent the text to Marcus. Deal. Is on 400,000, cash quick, close vacant by the 15th. Then I opened my banking app. I transferred my emergency fund to an offshore account I had set up years ago for a rainy day. It was pouring now. I stared at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were bright. My skin flushed. I did not look like a victim. I looked like someone who had just lit a fuse and was walking away before the explosion. I flushed the toilet just for show and walked back out to the dining room. The pie was gone. My mother was already clearing the plates, humming a gospel song under her breath. Everything okay, baby? She asked. Her mood improved 1,000% now that she had extracted what she wanted. Everything is perfect. Mom, I said. I am just really tired. I think I'm going to head back to the city. I have a lot of packing to do for London. Of course, she said, waving me off. You go, get your rest. We will see you soon. Oh, and Zola, leave the BMW keys when you go. Jasmine will need a car to get around the city. Yours is just sitting in the garage anyway. I paused, my hand on the back of my chair. The BMW, my pride and joy. The car I bought with my first big bonus. The car I kept spotless. Sure, Mom, I said, my voice not wavering an inch. I will leave the keys on the counter with the house keys. You guys can have it all. Jasmine squealed again, rushing over to hug me. It was a fake hug, a squeeze of the shoulders without any real warmth. You are the best sister ever, Zola. Seriously, we are going to take such good care of everything. I hugged her back, patting her shoulder awkwardly. I know you will, I said. I said my goodbyes, hugging my father who smelled like old spice and passivity. I walked out into the cold Chicago night, the wind biting at my cheeks, but I did not feel the cold. I felt a burning, white-hot clarity. As I drove away, I looked back at the house one last time. The lights were warm in the windows. It looked like a happy home, a loving home. But I knew the truth. It was a nest of vipers, and I had just locked them in a cage of their own making. The drive back to the city was a blur. I listened to jazz, the saxophone screaming the way I wanted to. My mind was a checklist: movers, storage unit, flight bookings, and the pièce de résistance, the final surprise I would leave for them on the kitchen counter. They wanted my life. They could have the empty shell of it. I was going to strip it down to the studs. When I got back to my condo, I walked through the rooms, turning on every light. I looked at my sofa, my art, my books. I loved this place. It was the first thing that was truly mine. But looking at it now, all I could see was Kyle's feet on the table and my mother criticizing the paint color. It had to go, all of it. I sat down at my laptop and started typing. The listing for the BMW went up first. Price to sell fast. Cash only. Then I emailed the cleaning crew. I needed a deep clean. The kind that removes every trace of DNA. I wanted the place to look like nobody had ever lived there. Then I opened a new tab and searched for flights. I did not want London. London was cold and gray and too close to the life I was leaving. I wanted sun. I wanted ocean. I wanted a place where my phone would not ring. Maldives. One way. First class. I booked it without hesitation. The confirmation email hit my inbox with a satisfying ding. Then I sat back and poured myself a glass of whiskey. Neat. I swirled the amber liquid, watching the light catch it. Let them pack. Let them brag. Let them tell everyone in their church group about how their generous daughter was giving them her luxury condo. Let them build their castles in the air. Because in 3 weeks gravity was going to kick in. And I was going to be 30,000 feet in the air, sipping champagne while they hit the ground. The game was on. And I never lost. The drive back to the city usually cleared my head, but that morning the hum of the engine only amplified the buzzing in my brain. I had left my parents' house with a smile and a lie about London, but my purse felt heavier than usual. Tucked inside my bag was a stack of unopened mail I had swiped from the overflowing basket on my mother's kitchen counter right before I left. It was a habit from my job as a forensic accountant. You never know what people are hiding until you look at what they throw away or ignore. When I walked into my condo, the silence was different. It used to feel like peace. Now it felt like a crime scene. I went straight to my home office, a glass-walled room overlooking the Chicago skyline. This was my command center. 3 monitors, secure servers, and access to databases that could find a needle in a haystack of shell companies. I sat down in my ergonomic chair and cracked my knuckles. It was time to go to work. I was not auditing a corrupt Fortune 500 company. Today, I was auditing my family. I started with Kyle, my brother-in-law with the blindingly white teeth and the resume full of gaps. He claimed he was launching a tech incubator, a venture that required my living room as a headquarters. I pulled up the state business registry, first red flag. There was no LLC registered in his name, or any variation of the buzzwords he had used at dinner. No business license, no domain name registration. Nothing. I dug deeper, accessing an employment verification database I use for background checks. Kyle had not listed his last employer on LinkedIn, but the database never forgets. He had been employed by a mid-sized logistics firm in the suburbs up until 6 months ago. The separation code was not voluntary, it was termination for cause. I leaned closer to the screen, tapping into the court records database. It took me 10 minutes to find it. A civil judgment filed by that same logistics firm. Kyle had been caught expensing personal items as office supplies. Electronics, gift cards, high-end headphones. It was petty theft amounting to about $5,000. They had fired him and sued him for restitution. He was not a visionary entrepreneur. He was a petty thief who got caught stealing pencils. But that did not explain the desperation in my father's voice, or the way my mother looked at him like he was a ticking time bomb. A man who steals office supplies is annoying. A man who needs a free condo in the Gold Coast is running from something bigger. I reached into my purse and pulled out the stack of mail I had taken. The envelopes were crinkled, stained with coffee rings. My parents were chaotic with their paperwork, relying on the ignore it until it goes away method of financial planning. I shuffled past the flyers and the pre-approved credit card offers until I found it. A thick envelope with a red stamp on the front, urgent final. Notice? It was addressed to Kyle, but it had been sent to my parents' address. He must be using their house as a mail drop to hide things from Jasmine. I sliced it open. Inside was a demand letter from a collection agency representing an online sports betting platform. The number at the bottom of the page made my breath hitch. $45,000. Kyle was not pivoting careers. He was drowning. He had gambled away $45,000, probably thinking he could win back the money he owed his former employer. And now the sharks were circling, sending letters to my parents' house. My father knew. My mother knew. They were not asking me to house a budding businessman. They were asking me to hide a degenerate gambler so he would not get his legs broken or his car repossessed, and they were willing to sacrifice my safety and my assets to do it. I took a photo of the letter and uploaded it to my secure cloud file labeled Family Audit. This was bad, but it was not the worst part. The worst part, was waiting for me in my own credit report. I am a forensic accountant. I track money for a living. I find hidden assets for divorce lawyers and uncover fraud for the government. But like a mechanic who drives a car with a check engine light, I had neglected my own financial hygiene. I had excellent credit. I paid my bills on autopay, and I rarely checked the details because I knew I had the money. I was arrogant. I logged into the credit bureau portal and requested my full detailed report. The wheels spun on the screen for a few seconds before the data populated. I scrolled down past my mortgage, past my car lease, past my student loans, which I had paid off 5 years ago. And then I stopped. There was a credit card I did not recognize. A Barclay card opened 10 years ago. The status was open. The balance was $19,800, just $200 under the limit. I stared at the screen, trying to make sense of it. 10 years ago, I was 25, struggling to get my first promotion, living in a studio apartment, eating ramen. I had not opened a luxury credit card. I clicked on the transaction history, expecting to see identity theft from a stranger, maybe a hacker in Russia or a scammer in Florida. The first transaction was from 10 years ago, a tuition payment to the New York Film Academy, $2,000. My blood ran cold. I remembered that year Jasmine had gotten into that unaccredited art school. My parents had told me they sold a plot of land to pay for it. They had made such a big show of their sacrifice. They had not sold anything. They had used my name. I looked at the dates. The card was opened the same week. I had visited home for Thanksgiving that year. I had left my purse in the kitchen while I helped my dad rake leaves. My Social Security card was in my wallet. My mother, Beatrice, the woman who quoted scripture at breakfast and judged my hemline at dinner, had stolen my identity. She had opened a credit card in my name, maxed it out to fund Jasmine's failed dreams, and then kept it open for a decade, making minimum payments to keep me from finding out. I scrolled through 10 years of transactions. It was a diary of my sister's, life funded by my credit score. A flight to Miami for spring break, $800. A designer handbag from Saks, Fifth Avenue, $2,000. VIP tickets to a music festival. A deposit on a luxury rental car, and then more recently, baby furniture. A stroller that cost more than my first car, and thousands of dollars in cash advances, likely funneling money to Kyle to pay off his bookie. I felt a physical pain in my chest, sharp and hot. It wasn't just the money I could pay off $20,000. It would hurt, but it would not bankrupt me. It was the betrayal. It was the realization that for 10 years, every time my mother hugged me, she knew she was robbing me. Every time my father told me he was proud of my independence, he was secretly banking on my ignorance. They had shackled me to their golden child. They had decided that my credit, my name, my future was common property to be harvested whenever Jasmine needed a new toy or a new start. I sat back in my chair, the glow of the monitors illuminating the tears. I refused to let fall. I was not going to cry. Crying was for victims. And I was not a victim. I was the auditor. I downloaded the full report. I cross-referenced the dates with family events, ensuring I could prove I was not the one making these purchases. I found photos on Jasmine's Instagram, matching the dates of the purchases, her posing with the bag, her checking in at the festival, her smiling in the expensive sunglasses bought with my stolen identity. I built a dossier folder. A was Kyle, the embezzler. Folder B was Beatrice and Otis. The identity thieves folder. C was Jasmine, the beneficiary. This changed everything. Before I just wanted to sell the condo and disappear, I wanted to cut ties and live my life in peace. But peace was no longer an option. You do not make peace with parasites. You exterminate them. They wanted to move into my home. They wanted to sleep in my bed and use my kitchen while secretly carrying $20,000 of debt in my name. They were smiling in my face while holding a knife to my financial throat. I looked at the calendar. It was December 26th. I had told them I was leaving on January 15th. That gave me 3 weeks. 3 weeks to execute the sale, 3 weeks to secure my assets, and 3 weeks to let them dig their hole so deep they would never climb out. I picked up my phone and dialed Marcus. He was a shark, a real estate investor who bought distressed properties for cash. He had been trying to get into my building for a year. Zola, he answered, his voice gravelly. Is everything okay? I am ready to sell, Marcus, I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears, detached and cold. 400,000. Cash. Quick close. I need to be out by the 15th. Done, Marcus said immediately. I can have the wire ready in 48 hours, but we need to do a walkthrough. No walkthroughs, I said. I will send you a video tour. The place is immaculate. You know the building, you know the value. Take it or leave it. I will take it, he said. I will have my lawyer draft the papers tonight. Why the rush? Zola, you in trouble? No, Marcus, I said, watching the cursor blink on my screen, next to the evidence of my mother's crime. I am not in trouble. I am just taking out the trash. I hung up the phone and looked at the spreadsheet of my life, my assets, my liabilities, my family. They were all just numbers now. And the math did not add up. I needed to liquidate everything, the car, the furniture, the investments linked to my old address. I needed to become a ghost, a wealthy ghost. I spent the next hour moving money. I opened a new account at an international bank, one with strict privacy laws. I transferred my savings, my investment portfolio, everything I could touch. I changed my passwords, using randomized alphanumeric strings that not even I could memorize without my manager. Then I drafted a letter to the credit bureaus disputing the fraudulent account. I did not send it yet. That was the nuclear option. If I reported it now, the investigation would start and my parents would be alerted. They would know I knew, and they would run or beg or gaslight me into silence. No, I needed them comfortable. I needed them arrogant. I needed them to spend the next 3 weeks packing their boxes and dreaming of their new life in my penthouse. I needed them to feel the victory so the defeat would break them. I closed the laptop and walked out of my office into the living room. The condo was silent, beautiful and cold. I ran my hand along the back of the sofa. Kyle wanted to throw away. I looked at the walls. Jasmine wanted to paint pink. They would never touch this. Not really. I went to the kitchen and poured the rest of the wine down the sink. It tasted sour now. I washed the glass and dried it, placing it perfectly back in the cabinet. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Jasmine. Hey sis, we are so excited. Mom said you agreed regarding the BMW. You are literally the best. I was thinking for the nursery. Do you mind if we get rid of that guest bed? It is kind of bulky. Let me know. Love you. Love you. The words looked like a threat, I typed back, my fingers flying across the screen. No problem at all, Jasmine. Get rid of whatever you want. I am leaving it all behind. Anyway, new year, new start. I hit send and watch the delivered status appear. Enjoy it while it lasts. Little sister, I whispered to the empty room, because the bill is coming due, and I am going to make sure you pay every single cent. The ink on the digital contract was barely dry when my phone buzzed. It was Marcus confirming the wire transfer. $400,000 minus the expedited closing fees would hit my offshore account within 48 hours. I sat in my home office, staring at the screen, feeling a strange cocktail of adrenaline and ice in my veins. I had just sold my home, my sanctuary, for 10% under market value just to ensure a cash close that would be irreversible by the time my family found out Marcus had asked fewer questions than I expected. He was a shark in a Tom Ford suit, a man who smelled blood in the water and did not care about the source. He just wanted the prime real estate in the Gold Coast with the lake views. The stipulation that the property be delivered vacant and broom clean by January 15th was standard, but the leaseback agreement I requested was the key. It gave me legal possession for exactly enough time to execute the final phase of my plan. I closed my laptop and walked to the window, looking out at the city covered in a fresh layer of gray snow. Chicago was beautiful, but it was cold. It was a cold that seeped into your bones, much like the realization that your parents loved your credit score more than they loved you. It was time to sell the lie. I drove to my parents' house that evening. The BMW purred beneath me, a smooth, powerful machine that I had worked 2 years to pay off. My mother had always eyed it with a mixture of jealousy and calculation, asking why a single woman needed such a big car. Today, I was going to give her exactly what she wanted. When I walked into the house, the smell of pot roast greeted me. It was my favorite meal, a fact my mother knew and used as currency. She was in the kitchen humming to herself, looking for all the world like a loving matriarch. My father, Otis, was watching television in the den, the volume turned up too high. "Zola, baby, you made it!" Beatrice exclaimed, wiping her hands on her apron, avoiding my eyes just enough to let me know she was already plotting her next ask. Sit down, sit down. Jasmine and Kyle are on their way. I told them you had big news." I sat at the kitchen island, the granite cold under my fingertips. I had told them I had a career update. I did not tell them it was a fabrication woven from their own avarice. When Jasmine and Kyle arrived, they breezed in with the entitlement of people who had never been told no. Jasmine was wearing a new coat that looked suspiciously expensive, likely bought with the credit card I was currently paying off. Kyle gave me a fist bump, his eyes darting around the kitchen as if looking for something else to steal. "So what is the news?" Jasmine asked, sliding into the seat next to me, dropping her keys on the counter. "Did you get a promotion?" "In a way," I said, leaning back and crossing my legs. I summoned the performance of a lifetime, channeling every corporate executive I had ever audited. "I am being transferred," I said, letting the words hang in the air for a moment before dropping the hammer. "London. London." My mother repeated the word, escaping her lips like a gasp. "Yes," I continued, keeping my voice steady and professional. "My firm is opening a new forensic division for the European market focused on international fraud. They want me to lead it. It is a 3-year contract minimum." "And the money?" Kyle asked, leaning forward, his greed practically vibrating off him. "Double my current salary." I lied, adding a zero to the imaginary figure in their heads, plus a housing allowance, a per diem, and relocation costs. "I will be living in Kensington, corporate apartment, fully furnished." The room went silent for a heartbeat as they processed this. They were not calculating how much they would miss me. They were not thinking about how far away I would be. They were doing the math on what this meant for them. My mother was the first to speak, her face breaking into a wide, predatory smile. "Oh, Zola, that is wonderful," she gushed, coming around the island to hug me. "I knew you were destined for greatness. London, think of the prestige. And 3 years, that is a long time." "It is," I agreed, returning the hug with a stiffness she did not notice or did not care about. It happened very fast. I have to be there by the end of the month. So the condo. Jasmine cut in, her voice sharp. Is it still ours? I pulled back from my mother and looked at my sister. Her eyes were wide, hungry. Of course, I said. That has not changed. In fact, it works out perfectly. Since I will have corporate housing in London, I do not need the place here. It would just sit empty. I would rather you guys use it. Jasmine squealed, grabbing Kyle's hand. Did you hear that, babe? We are going to be living in the Gold Coast for free. Kyle grinned, leaning back in his chair like he had just closed a merger. That is huge, Zola, really huge. We can really get the incubator off the ground now with that kind of address. Investors love a good address. My mother was already moving on to the next item on her mental checklist. So if you have a furnished apartment in London, she said, tapping her chin thoughtfully. You will not need your furniture, right? That leather sofa, the dining set, the big television? No, I said, playing along. I will not need any of it. It is too expensive to ship, and the new place has everything I need. Good, Beatrice said, nodding decisively. Then you should leave it all for Jasmine and Kyle. They are just starting out, Zola. They do not have furniture that fits a place like that. Your stuff is a bit modern for my taste, but it is high quality. It will save them thousands. I watched them dividing up my possessions, my life while I was still sitting there. They were vultures, picking at a carcass that was not even dead yet. Sure, I said, my voice flat. Take it all. The sofa, the TV, the bed, everything. I want you guys to be comfortable. Jasmine beamed, looking at me with something that almost resembled affection. You are the best sister ever, Zola. I mean it. We are going to take such good care of your stuff, I am sure you will. I said, sipping the iced tea my mother had poured me. It tasted sweet, too sweet, masking the bitterness underneath. And then came the big one, the ask I knew was coming. My mother cleared her throat, smoothing down her apron in a gesture I recognized as her tell. She wanted something big. You know? Zola. She started, her voice dropping to that conspiratorial whisper she used when she was asking for money. London has very good public transportation, does it not? The tube. I hear it is very efficient. It is, I said, waiting. And driving in London is a nightmare on the wrong side of the road and all those congestion charges. You probably will not be needing a car. I looked at her, my BMW 5 Series. The car that represented the first time I felt truly independent. The car she had called a waste of money when I bought it, but constantly asked to borrow for church. I suppose not, I said. Well, Beatrice continued, gaining confidence. She has a car sitting in a garage for 3 years, is bad for the engine, it ruins the battery, the tires rot. It would be a waste, really. A sin to let a beautiful machine like that just sit there and rot. I took a slow breath. She was doing it. She was asking for my car for Jasmine without even asking me directly. Jasmine needs a reliable car, my mother said, gaining speed. Her old sedan is on its last legs. And if she is going to be pregnant soon, which we are all praying for, she needs something safe, something with good airbags and heated seats, for the winter. Winters in Chicago are brutal, Zola. You know that? She paused, waiting for me to connect the dots she had drawn. You want the BMW, I asked, cutting through the dance. My mother smiled, a tight, thin expression. Well, it just makes sense, doesn't it? You are going to be in London, living the high life, making double your salary. You can afford to be generous. Jasmine is your sister, Zola. She is family, and family helps family. I looked at Kyle, who was trying to suppress a grin. He was already picturing himself driving my car, rolling up to his imaginary business meetings looking like a success he had not earned. I looked at my father, Otis. He was staring at the TV, pretending not to hear, but I saw his shoulders hunch. He knew this was wrong. He knew they were stripping me bare, but he would never stand up to Beatrice. He was a coward. And then I looked at Jasmine. She was looking at me with that expectant entitlement. The belief that she deserved my things simply because she existed. If I said no, they would call me selfish. They would say I was punishing them for my success. They would guilt-trip me until I broke or until I cut them off. And right now, I needed them close. I needed them thinking they had won. Okay, I said. The word hung in the air, simple and devastating. You can have the car? Jasmine screamed a high-pitched sound that grated on my nerves. She jumped up and threw her arms around me again, tighter this time. Oh my God. Zola, thank you. Thank you. I am going to drive it so carefully, I promise. My mother let out a breath she had been holding, slapping the counter triumphantly. There, see? That is my girl. That is the Zola. I raised generous kind, always looking out for her family. I knew you would do the right thing. The right thing, I thought. The right thing would be to tell you that you are thieves. The right thing would be to call the police and report the identity theft. The right thing would, be to scream until my throat bled. But I did none of those things. I just smiled that same frozen mask. Like smile. I will leave the keys with the house keys on the counter. On the 15th, I said. The title is in the glove box. You guys can handle the registration transfer, right? Oh, absolutely, Kyle said, puffing out his chest. I will take care of all the paperwork. Do not you worry about a thing. Zola, just focus on London. We spent the rest of the evening celebrating my departure. My mother opened a bottle of champagne she had been saving, likely for Jasmine's pregnancy announcement, but decided this heist was worth the cork. She toasted to my new job, but mostly she toasted to Jasmine's new life. To Jasmine and Kyle, she said, raising her glass. May this be the start of the abundance you deserve. And to Zola for making it possible. I drank the champagne and it tasted like gasoline. They talked about the car for an hour. Jasmine wanted to get custom seat covers. Kyle wanted to upgrade the sound system. They talked about my furniture, about how they would rearrange the living room to fit a playpen. They talked about my life as if I had already vacated it, as if I were a ghost haunting my own story. I sat there and nodded, answering their questions about London with lies I had researched on Wikipedia. I told them about the flat in Kensington, about the view of Hyde Park, about the imaginary executive assistant who was handling my logistics. They ate it up. They believed every word because they wanted to believe it. They wanted me gone so they could have my things. My absence was the key to their upgrade. Around 9 o'clock, I stood up. My head was pounding and my skin felt too tight. I should get going, I said. I have a lot of packing to do. The movers are coming early next week to take the stuff I am putting in storage, mainly just clothes and personal files. Right. Right, my mother said, walking me to the door. Do not pack too much. Zola, remember, you are getting a fresh start. You can buy new clothes in London. Paris fashion. Right? Right, I said. Paris fashion. She hugged me at the door, a quick squeeze that felt more like a pat-down. You are a good daughter, Zola. I am proud of you tonight. You are finally understanding what it means to be part of this family. I understood, all right. I understood that being part of this family meant being a host for parasites. I walked out to my BMW, the car that was no longer mine. In their eyes, I unlocked it and slid into the leather seat, running my hands over the steering wheel. I loved this car. It was the first thing I bought that made me feel like I had made it. I started the engine and the dashboard lit up, comforting and bright. I was not going to give it to them. I was not going to give them a single screw from the license plate. I drove away from the house, watching them in the rearview mirror. My mother was standing on the porch, waving her silhouette framed by the light. She looked happy. She looked satisfied. She thought she had stripped me clean. She had no idea. As I merged onto the highway, heading back toward the city, I made a mental list. The condo was sold. The closing was set for the 14th. The money would be offshore by the 15th. The furniture was scheduled for removal by a liquidation company. They would come in the night before I left and clear everything out. The proceeds would be donated to a charity for victims of financial abuse. And the car. I looked at the dashboard clock. It was barely 9:30. The dealership was closed, but I knew the owner. I had audited his books 3 years ago and saved him from a hefty IRS fine. He owed me a favor. I pulled over to the shoulder and dialed his number. "Frank, it is Zola," I said when he answered. "I need to sell the BMW." "Tonight, Zola," he sounded surprised. "Everything okay?" "Everything is fine," I said, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. "I am just liquidating assets. I am moving London," he asked. "Something like that," I said. "Can you meet me at the lot? I have the title. I will be there in 20 minutes, Frank said. I hung up and merged back into traffic. The car hummed beneath me, responsive and loyal. It was a good car. It deserved a better owner than Jasmine. I was going to sell it tonight. I would rent a cheap sedan for the next few weeks. Something nondescript, something that would not draw attention. I would park it in my spot at the condo and let them assume the BMW was in the shop, or getting detailed. I would keep up the charade until the very last second. I would let them pack their boxes. I would let them cancel their lease. I would let them dream their little dreams of stealing my life. And then I would vanish. The road ahead was dark, but for the first time in my life, I knew exactly where I was going. I was going to freedom, and the toll was $400,000 and a BMW, a small price to pay for a life that was finally mine. The notification on my phone buzzed at 10 in the morning. Sharp. Motion detected living room. I was sitting in a rented workspace, 3 blocks away, pretending to be finalizing my London transfer documents. But in reality, I was watching the invasion of my sanctuary on a high-definition screen. I had given Jasmine a spare key yesterday, telling her she could come over to measure the windows for her new drapes. It was the equivalent of inviting a vampire across the threshold. I watched as the heavy oak door swung open. Jasmine walked in first, holding a venti latte like a scepter. She did not wipe her boots. Snow and city grit tracked across my hand, woven Moroccan rug leaving dark smears on the cream wool. Kyle followed close behind, carrying a tape measure and a 6-pack of beer. At 10 in the morning, I adjusted the volume on my earbuds, listening to them dissect my life. "It smells like old lady in here," Jasmine announced, wrinkling her nose. She walked over to my bookshelf, running a finger along the spine of a vintage first edition I had hunted down in New Orleans. "We have to get rid of all these books, Kyle. They take up much space and nobody reads anymore. We need floating shelves for my crystal collection." I gripped my coffee cup tight. The books were not just decoration, they were my history. But I forced my hand to relax. I reminded myself that in 10 days none of this would matter. In 10 days, this apartment would be empty, and they would be standing on the curb. Kyle laughed, popping the tab on a beer. The sound cracked through the audio feed, sharp and disrespectful. He took a long swig and burped loud and wet. "Hey babe, look at this sofa." He pointed to my pride and joy. A low-profile Italian leather sectional in a shade of white, so pure it looked like a cloud. It had cost me $5,000 plus shipping, and I treated it with more respect than I treated most people. "I bet we can get a few $100 for it on Facebook Marketplace," Kyle said, walking toward it. He did not sit down. He flopped down, throwing his heavy frame onto the delicate leather cushions. He kicked his feet-up boots still uncrossing, his ankles right on the armrest, mud flaking off his soles onto the pristine white surface. I felt a vein in my forehead throb. That leather was imported. It was soft as butter, and he was treating it like a park bench. Jasmine pulled a pad of neon pink sticky notes out of her purse. "Okay, let us get organized," she said, her voice taking on that bossy tone she used when she was playing pretend. "Anything Zola said, we can keep whatever we want and sell the rest to fund the redecorating. So I am going to tag everything." She started moving through the room like a plague, slapping pink squares onto my possessions. My dining table handcrafted walnut. "Sell," she said loud enough for the microphone to pick up. "It is too dark. We need something glass and gold. More modern." My art collection framed prints from black artists I had supported for years. Trash, she declared, sticking a note right on the glass of a limited edition lithograph. It does not match the vibe. My grandmother's antique vase, the one thing I had managed to salvage from her house before my mother sold everything. Sell. I watched in silence as they categorized my life into piles of profit and garbage. They were not just redecorating, they were erasing me. They were stripping the identity out of the space, preparing to wear my home like a skin suit. Kyle was still on the sofa chugging his beer. He shifted, trying to get comfortable, and knocked the can against his knee. Amber liquid sloshed out, splashing onto the white leather and dripping down onto the rug. "Oops," he muttered. He did not jump up. He did not run for a towel. He just used his hand to smear the beer into the leather, spreading the stain wider, trying to rub it in so it would not be visible. I took a screenshot of the video feed. Evidence destruction of property. It would not help me in court because I had technically given them permission to be there, but it fueled the fire in my gut. It reminded me why I was doing this, why I was not leaving them a single crumb. "Do not worry about it," Babe Jasmine said, not even looking up from tagging my television. "Sell huge profit. It is just a couch. We are getting a new one anyway. Zola won't notice, she is too busy packing for London." "Yeah, she is checking out." Kyle laughed. He finished the beer and crushed the can in his hand, dropping it onto the floor, not into the recycling bin. On the floor of my living room, I closed the laptop. I had seen enough. If I watched any more, I was going to march over there and throw them off the balcony. I needed to go back there. I needed to play the part. I checked the time. It was noon. I would give them another hour to fantasize, then I would make my entrance. I stopped at a print shop on the way back. I had a file on my phone that I had been saving for this exact moment. It was a brochure, a trifold pamphlet with bold, tragic text on the front. It read, "When the Fun Stops Gambling Addiction, Support, and Recovery." I printed one copy on glossy paper so it looked official, like something you would pick up at a clinic. When I walked into my condo, the air was thick with the smell of stale beer and expensive perfume. My eyes went immediately to the sticky notes. They were everywhere, like a rash. The apartment looked like it had been vandalized by a glittery vandal. Jasmine was in the kitchen measuring the refrigerator for some reason. Kyle was passed out on my sofa, mouth open, snoring softly. The crushed beer can was still on the rug. "Zola." Jasmine jumped when she saw me spinning around playing the innocent sister. "Oh hey, you are back early. We were just doing some planning, I see that," I said, my voice cheerful and bright. I walked over to the dining table and peeled the cell note off the walnut surface. "You guys are really thorough." Jasmine laughed nervously. "Yeah, well, we want to hit the ground running once you leave. We figured if we sell some of the old stuff, we can use the money to really elevate the space, make it worthy of the address." Elevate. I looked at the beer stain on the rug. Elevate, indeed. That is smart thinking, Jasmine. I said, "I am glad you are taking initiative. Since I am leaving, it is all yours anyway. Do whatever you want." I walked over to the sofa and nudged Kyle's boot with my toe. He snorted and woke up blinking groggily. "Oh, hey Zola," he said, wiping drool from his chin. "Just testing out the merchandise." It is a little stiff, to be honest. Not really a lounging couch. I smiled tight and sharp. "I will keep that in mind, Kyle. I am sure you will find something softer to sleep on eventually." I walked past him toward the hallway where he had tossed his jacket. It was a flashy bomber jacket, something he thought made him look like a music producer instead of a thief. It was draped over my entry console. "I have a few last-minute meetings to prep for," I said, keeping my back to them. "I just came by to grab some files." I reached out and smoothed the fabric of Kyle's jacket quick and practiced. With a sleight of hand that would have made a magician proud, I slipped the addiction brochure into the inner breast pocket. It nestled there, waiting like a landmine. Kyle had a secret, a $50,000 secret that he was keeping from my sister. And Jasmine, for all her faults, would not tolerate a broke gambler. She wanted a provider, not a project. When he found that brochure, or worse, when she found it, the questions would start. The paranoia would set in. I turned back to face them, my expression serene. "You guys stay as long as you want," I said. "I am going to be in my office with the door closed. Just try not to tag me with a sticky note." "Okay?" Jasmine giggled, forcing a lightness she did not feel. "Oh, Zola, you are funny. By the way, Mom called. She wants to know if you can pay for the movers," she said. "Since you are leaving us, the furniture, it is technically your responsibility to move it around for us." The audacity was breathtaking. It was almost impressive in its scope. They wanted my house, my car, my furniture, and now they wanted me to pay for the labor to rearrange it, all to their liking. "Tell Mom I will handle it," I said, lying through my teeth. "I will send you the confirmation number for the moving company later." I walked into my office and shut the door, leaning back against the wood and exhaling a long, shaky breath. I pulled up the camera feed on my computer screen again. I watched them in the other room. Kyle stood up, stretching, and put on his jacket. He patted the pockets, checking for his phone and his keys. He missed the brochure inside. Jasmine walked over to him and kissed his cheek, hugging him possessively. "This is going to be our year, baby," she said. "I can feel it. We are finally getting what we deserve." Kyle smirked, wrapping his arm around her waist. "Yeah, we are. Big things coming." I watched them celebrating their theft, completely unaware of the ticking clock hanging over their heads. They thought they were moving on up to the east side. They did not know they were standing on a trapdoor. I opened my email and checked the status of the sale closing. The title company had sent the final documents for e-signature. The wire transfer from the investor was scheduled for the morning of the 14th. I signed the documents with a flourish of my mouse. Then I opened a new tab and searched for a cleaning service. I needed a specific kind of crew, a forensic cleaning crew usually used for crime scenes or hoarders. I needed them to come in on the night of the 14th after my fake farewell party and strip the place bare. I typed out the request. Empty the unit, remove all furniture, appliances, and personal items. Nothing remains. Donations or disposal. Client does not care. The unit must be broom clean by 6 a.m. on the 15th. I hit send. In the other room, I heard Kyle laugh again. It was a loud, booming sound full of arrogance. He opened another beer. "Enjoy it, Kyle," I whispered to the screen. "Drink up, because the hangover is going to be legendary." I spent the rest of the afternoon working in my office, listening to the sounds of my sister and her husband dismantling my life. Sticky note by sticky note, they argued over who would get the master closet. They debated whether to turn my office into a man cave or a nursery. They spoke about me in the past tense as if I had already boarded the plane and vanished. At one point around 4 p.m., Kyle knocked on my door. "Yo, Zola, you got a charger?" "My phone is dying." I opened the door a crack, holding out a spare cable. "Here you go." "Thanks," he said, taking it. He hesitated, looking past me into the office at my monitors. "Nice setup. You taking the computers too?" "No," I said. "I am getting new ones in London. You can have these." His eyes lit up. "Awesome. I can use this for the incubator. Top of the line, right?" "Top of the line." I agreed. He nodded, grinning. "Thanks, sis. You are a lifesaver." He walked away whistling. I closed the door and locked it. He had no idea. The computer he was salivating over was wiped clean every night. The hard drive was encrypted with military-grade software, and the IP address was logging every single site he visited, every bet he placed, every lie he told. I sat back down and opened the folder labeled Evidence. I added the video clip of the beer spill. I added the audio of Jasmine asking for the movers' fees. Then I opened the file for Kyle. I had found his old email address, the one linked to his gambling accounts. I had not hacked it, that would be illegal. But I had found that his password was his birthday, followed by his high school jersey number. Predictable. I did not log in, but I could see the password reset notifications piling up in his spam folder from my earlier recon. He was getting desperate, chasing losses, trying to win back enough to pay off the sharks before they came collecting. He thought this condo was his salvation. He thought living rent-free would free up enough cash to cover his debts. He thought he had outsmarted the system. But he forgot one thing. The system always wins. And in this house I was the system. I checked the time. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the room. It was almost time for me to leave, to go back to my parents' house for dinner, to play the role of the dutiful departing daughter. One more time. I packed up my laptop, my real one, not the decoy on the desk. I grabbed my purse. I walked out into the living room. Jasmine and Kyle were gone. They had left a mess. Empty beer cans, takeout wrappers, and a sea of pink sticky notes covering every surface. I walked over to the sofa and looked at the stain. It was drying dark and ugly. I reached down and peeled the sell sticky note off the cushion. I crumpled it in my fist. "Not for sale," I whispered. "Trash. All of it. Trash." The 14th of January dawned with a sky the color of a bruised plum gray and heavy, with the threat of snow. It was fitting weather for an execution sitting in the plush leather chair of the title company's office. I felt a strange sense of calm settling over me like a blanket. The room smelled of old paper and lemon polish, a scent that usually reminded me of tax audits and long nights at the firm, but today it smelled like escape. Marcus sat across from me, tapping a gold pen against his chin. He looked at the stack of documents between us. The deed, the bill of sale, the transfer of ownership. He did not ask why I was selling my prime Gold Coast condo for cash in a rush. He did not ask why I was willing to take a hit on the market value. He just pushed the papers toward me. "Sign here, Zola," he said, pointing to the line that would sever my last legal tie to the property. "And initial here." I picked up the pen. My hand did not shake. I signed my name with a flourish, the ink flowing smooth and black onto the white page. With every loop of the Z and every cross of the T, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. A weight I had been carrying since I was 20 years old, begging for a student loan at a kitchen table. "Congratulations," Marcus said, sliding a tablet across the table. "The wire has been initiated. It should hit your account within the hour." I watched the screen. The status bar loaded slowly, crawling from pending to processing and finally to complete. $400,000 minus the fees landed in my new offshore account. It was a number that looked like freedom. It was enough to pay off the fraudulent credit card debt my parents had racked up in my name, with plenty left over to start a new life where they could never find me. "Thank you, Marcus," I said, standing up and shaking his hand. "Remember the leaseback agreement. I have possession until 6 a.m. tomorrow." He nodded. "Of course, the keys are yours until sunrise. After that, my crew comes in to start the demo. I almost smiled. He was going to gut the place, renovate it and flip it for double the price. It was perfect. My family was fighting over a shell that was about to be demolished. I walked out of the office and into the biting wind, clutching the receipt for the wire transfer like a lifeline. Step 1 was complete. The house was gone, legally speaking. Now I had to handle the car. BMW 5 Series was parked in the garage, gleaming under the fluorescent lights. It was the first thing I had bought when I made senior partner, a symbol that I had made it out of the struggle. But now it was just a liability. It was a tether that my family wanted to use to drag me back down. My mother wanted it for Jasmine so she could drive her imaginary baby to appointments she would never keep. I slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. The dashboard lit up, familiar and comforting. I ran my hand over the leather steering wheel one last time. "Goodbye, beautiful," I whispered. I drove straight to Frank's dealership. Frank was waiting for me in his office, a small glass-walled cube that smelled of stale coffee and ambition. He owed me a favor from an audit 3 years ago, where I had found a discrepancy that saved his business from bankruptcy. Zola, he said, standing up when I walked in. You sure about this? This car is mint condition. You could get more if you sold it privately. I do not have time for private. Frank, I said, placing the keys on his desk. I need it gone today, and I need cash or a cashier's check. He looked at me for a long moment, assessing me with eyes that had seen every kind of desperation. There were people selling cars to pay for divorces, for gambling debts, for bail money. He probably thought I was in trouble. He did not know I was the one causing the trouble. I will give you 35, he said. It is fair for a quick flip. Done, I said. He wrote the check, and I signed over the title. It took less than 20 minutes. Walking out of his office without my keys felt like phantom limb syndrome. My hand kept reaching for a fob that was not there, but the plan required a car. My family expected to see a BMW in the driveway. They expected me to hand over the keys tomorrow morning. If I showed up in an Uber, the questions would start. The suspicion would rot the whole scheme from the inside out. I walked 2 blocks down the street to a luxury rental agency I had called ahead. I needed a specific car. A black BMW 5 Series current model year, black interior. It had to be identical or close enough to fool someone who only saw what they wanted to see. The rental agent, a young man named Tyler who looked like he should be in a boy band, smiled at me. We got it ready for you, Ms. Williams. Just came back from a detail. I walked around the rental. It was perfect. The same color, the same rims. The only difference was the license plate and a small scratch on the rear bumper that my car did not have. Jasmine would never notice. She saw the badge, not the details. She saw the status symbol, not the machine. I rented it for 2 days, paying with a prepaid debit card. I did not want a paper trail leading back to my main accounts. Driving the rental felt strange. The seat was adjusted wrong. The mirrors were off. The smell was different. It smelled like industrial cleaner and other people's cologne. But from the outside, it was my car. It was the bait. I drove back to my condo and parked the rental in my designated spot, right in front of the building. I sat there for a moment watching the entrance. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Jasmine. Hey sis, Mom said you are bringing the car by tonight, right? I want to make sure I know how to use the Bluetooth. I stared at the message. The entitlement was so casual, so ingrained. She was already planning her playlist for a car she had not paid a dime for. Yeah, I typed back. Bringing it by later. Just finishing up some packing. Packing. That was the next step. I went upstairs to my condo. The place was a disaster zone of pink sticky notes and my family's footprints. I walked through the rooms feeling like an intruder in my own home. But it was not my home anymore. It was just a box. A box. I was about to empty. I opened my laptop and pulled up the website for a company called Junk Luggers. They were not movers. They were a removal service. They did not pack things in bubble wrap and put them in boxes. They came in with shovels and trash bags and took everything away. They cleaned out hoarders' houses, foreclosure properties, and crime scenes. They did not ask questions. They just cleared the space. I booked their platinum service for 6 a.m. The next morning, January 15th, I put in the special instructions section. Everything goes. Furniture, appliances, clothes, dishes. Nothing remains. The unit must be broom clean by 9 a.m. It cost me $3,000 prepaid. It was worth every cent. I could have sold the furniture. I could have donated the clothes. But that would have taken time and coordination. I did not have. I needed it. Gone fast. And I needed it gone completely. I wanted my family to walk into a void. I wanted them to unlock the door and find absolutely nothing, just the echo of their own greed. I spent the next few hours doing the final sweep. I went through my filing cabinets, shredding every document that had my name on it, old tax returns, bank statements, medical records. I put the shredded paper in black trash bags and carried them down to the dumpster myself. I went into the master bedroom and packed one suitcase. Just one. My essentials. My laptop. My hard drives with the evidence a week's worth of clothes and my passport. Everything else. My designer shoes, my coats, my jewelry, I left in the closet. Let the junk crew have them. Let them find a treasure trove. It was better than letting Jasmine parade around town in my clothes, pretending she had earned them. Around 6 p.m. I drove the rental car to my parents' house for the farewell dinner. My mother had insisted on it. A final family meal before I jetted off to my imaginary life in London. When I pulled into the driveway, Jasmine was waiting on the porch. She practically vibrated with excitement when she saw the BMW. She ran down the steps as I got out, her eyes glued to the car. "Is this it? Is this mine?" "It is here," I said, locking the doors with the rental fob. "Be careful with it, Jasmine. It has a lot of power." "Oh, I know," she said, running her hand along the hood. "I am going to look so good in this. Kyle is going to flip." She did not notice the license plate. She did not notice the scratch. She just saw the shiny black metal and the promise of status. "Let's go inside," I said. "Mom is waiting." The dinner was a surreal experience. My mother had cooked a feast: fried chicken, mac and cheese, collard greens, cornbread. It was a celebration of their victory. They were laughing, toasting to my trip, making plans for the condo. Kyle was talking about how he was going to set up his gaming rig in my office. He called it the command center. He had no idea the real command center was a laptop in my bag, filled with proof of his gambling debts. My father, Otis, was quiet, looking at me with sad eyes. "You be careful over there, Zola," he said. "London is a big city. Don't forget where you came from." I looked at him. The man who had let his wife steal my identity. The man who had watched me struggle and done nothing. "I won't forget, Dad," I promised. "I will never forget where I came from." That was the truth. Would never forget this house, this table, these people. They were the fuel that had burned away my softness and left only steel. After dinner, it was time for the handover. My mother made a big production of it, standing in the kitchen like she was presiding over a coronation. "All right, Zola, hand over the keys," she said, beaming. I reached into my purse and pulled out the set of keys I had prepared. The key to the condo front door, the fob for the building entry, and the key to the BMW. Or rather, the key to the rental. "Here you go," I said, placing them in Jasmine's outstretched hand. She clutched them to her chest like they were diamonds. "Thank you, Zola. You are seriously the best sister. I am going to miss you." "I am sure you will," I said, my voice dry. There was one more thing. One final twist of the knife. "Oh," I said, almost forgetting. "I left a welcome gift for you guys, on the kitchen island at the condo, just a little envelope with some important papers, the manuals for the appliances, the alarm codes, that sort of thing. Make sure you grab it first thing when you get there." Jasmine nodded vigorously. "Of course, we are heading over there first thing in the morning with the U-Haul." "Great," I said. "The movers are coming to get my stuff tonight, so the place will be mostly empty by the time you get there. But I left the big pieces for you, right? The sofa and the TV," Kyle said, grilling. "My man!" I looked at him, looked at the rental car. Key in Jasmine's hand, and felt a surge of dark satisfaction. "Well, I should go," I said. "I have an early flight. The car service is picking me up at 5 a.m. My mother hugged me, holding on, a little too long. "You call us when you land. Okay? We want to hear all about the flat." "I will," I said, pulling away. "I will send you an email." I walked out to the rental car and Jasmine followed me. She watched as I got in and started the engine. "Wait," she said, leaning in the window. "How am I supposed to drive it if you are driving it away now?" "Oh, right," I said, feigning scatterbrained exhaustion. Need to drive it back to the condo to park it in the garage. The spot is deeded to the unit, so it needs to be there. You guys can pick it up tomorrow when you move in. The fob is on the ring I just gave you. Jasmine nodded, satisfied. Makes sense. See you later, Zola. Have a safe flight. I drove away, leaving them standing in the driveway waving. They looked so happy, so full of anticipation. I drove the rental back to the city, but I did not park it in my garage. I drove it to the rental return lot at the airport, dropping it off in the after-hours lane. I dropped the key in the box, then I took a cab back to my building. I walked into my condo for the last time. It was midnight. The city was asleep. I stood in the center of the living room looking at the sticky notes, the stains, the evidence of their invasion. I pulled the envelope out of my bag, the one I had told Jasmine about. It did not contain appliance manuals. It contained a single sheet of paper, a printout of the final notice from the collection agency for Kyle's gambling debt, and underneath it, a copy of the credit report showing the identity theft with my mother's name highlighted as the authorized user. I placed the envelope in the center of the kitchen island, right where they could not miss it. Then I sat down on the floor and waited. The cleaning crew arrived at 5:55 a.m. They were efficient, ruthless. They moved like locusts, swarming the apartment, stripping it bare. I watched as they carried out the white leather sofa. It was stained with beer and malice. I watched them take the dining table, the bed, the books. By 8 a.m., the condo was empty. The walls were bare. The floors were swept clean. There was nothing left but the view of the lake, cold and indifferent, and the envelope on the counter. I stood at the door, my suitcase in hand. I looked back one last time. It was just a space now. 4 walls and a floor. It was not a home. It never had been. I walked out and locked the door behind me, leaving the key under the mat. Just like I promised, I took the elevator down to the lobby and walked out into the crisp morning air. A black town car was waiting for me. To the airport. Miss? The driver asked, opening the door. Yes, I said, sliding into the back seat. International Terminal. As the car pulled away, I checked my phone. It was 8:30 a.m. Jasmine and Kyle would be picking up the U-Haul right about now. They would be driving into the city expecting a luxury condo and a BMW. They were about to walk into an empty room and a life lesson they would never forget. I turned off my phone and tossed it into my bag. London was calling. Or rather, the Maldives were calling. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in 35 years I exhaled. The evening of January 14th was bitter cold in Chicago, the kind of wind that cuts through layers of wool and settles deep in your marrow. But inside my parents' house in the suburbs, I knew the air was warm, thick with the smell of my mother's cooking and the heavier scent of their collective self-satisfaction. They were throwing a party, a farewell party for me they called it, but we all knew what it really was. It was a victory lap. It was a housewarming party for a house they did not own. Celebrating a theft they thought they had pulled off without a hitch. I was not there. I was sitting in an airport lounge on the other side of the city, sipping a sparkling water and watching the flight board update. I had checked into my flight to the Maldives hours ago. My bags were checked. My phone was on silent, except for the notifications I had specifically set up for this moment. I could picture the scene at my parents' house perfectly. I knew their playbook better than they knew themselves. My mother, Beatrice, would be wearing her Sunday best, probably that royal blue dress she saved for when she wanted to feel like the queen of the parish. She would have invited everyone, Auntie May, Uncle Ron, the cousins from the south side, even the pastor. She needed an audience. A heist this big was no fun if you could not show off the loot. My phone buzzed. It was 7 p.m. The party was in full swing. My mother was calling. I let it ring. Once, twice. Then I sent it to voicemail. I opened my text messages and typed out the lie I had prepared days ago. Hey, Mom. I am so sorry I cannot make it tonight. The Packers just left and I am drowning in last-minute logistics for the London transfer. My flight got moved up to 6 a.m., so I have to head to the airport hotel tonight to make sure I am checked in on time. I paused, letting the cursor blink, imagining her reading it. She would feign disappointment for the crowd, but inside she would be relieved. My presence would only remind them of the crime. My absence allowed them to rewrite the story however they wanted. I continued typing. I left the keys under the welcome mat at the condo. The lobby fob and the garage remote are there too. You guys can head over whenever you want tomorrow morning. The place is all yours. Love you. I hit send. I could hear the cheer go up in that house. Back in the suburbs, Beatrice probably read the text aloud, her voice trembling with fake maternal concern. Oh Lord. Zola is so overworked that poor girl cannot even come to her own send-off. She is rushing to the airport right now. But then the mask would slip. The concern would melt into a smug grin. She would turn to Auntie May, who always looked at my mother with a mixture of suspicion and envy. It is for the best. Really, Beatrice would say, pouring generous glasses of punch. Zola is going to London for 3 years. 3 whole years, May. And she just insisted that Jasmine and Kyle take over the condo. She said, Mama, it makes no sense for that beautiful place to sit empty when family needs it. Auntie May would raise an eyebrow sipping her drink. She gave you the condo. Just like that. Oh, not gave. Beatrice would correct, waving her hand elegantly. She is letting them live there as caretakers. But between you and me, Zola knows she is not coming back anytime soon. She left everything, the furniture, the electronics, even that BMW. She said, Jasmine, take the car. I do not need it. Jasmine would be sitting on the sofa, my father's arm around her shoulders beaming like she had just won the lottery. She would chime in. Yeah. Zola was super cool about it. She knows Kyle and I are ready to take the next step. We need the space for the baby. There was no baby, not yet. But that was part of the script too. The imaginary grandchild that justified the robbery. Kyle would be in the corner holding court with the male cousins, bragging about the new headquarters for his tech incubator. Yeah, man, it is right in the Gold Coast, floor-to-ceiling windows. View of the lake? Kyle would say, swirling his drink. I need that kind of environment for my creative process. You know how it is. Zola's style was a little stiff, but we are going to loosen it up. Turn that second bedroom into a real power office. He would not mention the $50,000 gambling debt. He would not mention the letter from the collection agency that was currently sitting in a sealed envelope on my kitchen counter waiting for him. He was playing the big shot, spending social capital he had not earned. I watched the planes take off through the lounge window, heavy steel birds lifting effortlessly into the night sky. I felt a kinship with them. I was heavy too, heavy with secrets and anger, but I was about to fly. Back at the party, the food would be getting cold. My mother would be serving plates, piling them high with roast beef and mac and cheese. Food bought with money she should have used to pay off the credit card. She opened in my name. Did you hear? Beatrice would say, leaning in close to Auntie May, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. Zola is making double her salary in London. She is practically rich, but she has no one to share it with. That is the tragedy, May. She has the money, but Jasmine has the life. That is why she gave them the house. It is her way of buying a little bit of that family warmth she is missing. Buying family warmth. The irony was sharp enough to cut glass. I had bought them warmth, all right. I had paid their heating bills, their grocery bills, their bail money, and now I was paying for their lesson. I checked my security app on my phone. The camera in the condo hallway was still active. The cleaning crew I had hired, junk luggers, was scheduled to arrive in 6 hours at 3 a.m. I had paid them a rush fee to work through the night. I wanted the place stripped to the studs before the sun came up. But right now the condo was dark and quiet. The trap was set. I imagined my father Otis sitting in his recliner amidst the party noise. He would be quiet, nodding along to the lies, but drinking a little too much. He knew. He had to know deep down that this was wrong. But Otis was a man who had traded his spine for a quiet life. He would let his wife cannibalize one daughter to feed the other, as long as nobody yelled at him. "I hope Zola is okay," he might mumble into his drink. "London is far away." "Oh, hush, Otis," Beatrice would snap. "She is fine. She is a career woman. This is what she wants. She does not have the maternal instinct like Jasmine does. She is happy living out of a suitcase." Jasmine would stand up then, smoothing down her dress. She would raise a toast, a practice run for the life she thought she was stepping into. "To Zola," she would say, smiling that bright, empty smile. "To my big sister for finally looking out for us. We are going to make that condo a real home. Cheers," the family would roar. "Cheers," I whispered to the empty lounge glass, touching my lips. I could see the timeline unfolding in my head like a movie reel. 10 p.m. The party winds down. The guests leave, filled with envy and admiration for Beatrice's maneuvering. Auntie May leaves, thinking maybe she judged Beatrice too harshly, maybe Zola really is just generous and cold. 11 p.m. Jasmine and Kyle drive back to their current apartment, the cramped one with the eviction notice they had not told anyone about. They pack the last of their boxes. They talk about the view, about the parties they will throw, about the BMW parked in the driveway. Midnight. My parents go to bed. Beatrice sleeps the sleep of the righteous. Convinced she has orchestrated the perfect crime. She has secured a home for her favorite child, a car for her status, and she has successfully exiled the daughter who asks too many questions. 3 a.m. The junk luggers crew arrives at my condo. They have the code I texted them. They enter silently, efficiently. They are not movers. They are erasers. They take the sofa, the one Kyle stained. They take the dining table where my mother demanded I give up my home. They take the bed, the TV, the art, the rugs. They take every single item that made that space livable. 6 a.m. I board my flight. The cleaning crew leaves. The condo is a white box. Empty. Cold, echoing. The only thing left is the envelope on the kitchen island. 7 a.m. My flight takes off. I am in the air. Disconnected. Unreachable. 9 a.m. The U-Haul truck pulls up to the building. Jasmine, Kyle, and my parents pile out, ready to claim their prize. I checked my watch. It was almost time to board. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from Kyle. "Safe travels, Zola. Thanks again for the keys. We will take good care of the Beamer. Do not worry about a thing." I stared at the message. The Beamer. The rental car that was currently sitting in the return lot at O'Hare, miles away from where he thought it was. I did not reply. I powered down my phone. The screen went black, reflecting my face. I looked tired, but I also looked dangerous. I stood up and picked up my carry-on bag. I walked to the gate, my heels clicking a steady rhythm on the floor. I was leaving them behind. Not just physically, but existentially. I was leaving their drama, their debts, their gaslighting. I was leaving the version of myself that tolerated it. They were having a party to celebrate my departure. They were drinking my wine and planning their future in my house. They were so sure, so arrogant, so blind. They thought I was the goose that laid the golden egg. They forgot that the goose can also peck your eyes out. I handed my boarding pass to the attendant. "Have a nice flight, Ms. Williams," she said, smiling. "Oh, I will," I said, stepping onto the jet bridge. "I really will." Behind me in the city. I was leaving, the clock was ticking down. The party was over. The hangover was about to begin, and the eviction notice I had prepared was waiting, not on a door, but in the emptiness of a room they thought they owned. The keys were under the mat, just like I said. But they did not open a home. They opened a vault, and the vault was empty. The air in the first-class cabin of the Qatar Airways flight smelled of expensive leather and conditioned oxygen, a stark contrast to the biting Chicago wind. I had left outside the terminal. I settled into the pod, my body sinking into the seat that would soon convert into a fully flat bed. The flight attendant, a woman with impeccable posture and a smile that did not quite reach her eyes, offered me a glass of Krug champagne. I accepted it without hesitation. I looked at my boarding pass. It did not say London Heathrow. It said Valana International Airport, Malé, the Maldives. My mother thought I was flying into a gray English winter to work 80-hour weeks in a cramped office. She thought I was sacrificing my comfort so she could brag to her church friends about her international daughter. She thought I was grinding so Jasmine could play house in my luxury condo. She was wrong. I was flying to a private island in the Indian Ocean where the only ice I would see would be in my drink. I was going to turn off my phone, lay in the sun, and watch the world burn from 6,000 miles away. I took a sip of the champagne, the bubbles bursting sharp and bright on my tongue. I checked my watch. It was 6 a.m., exactly, right now across the city. The second phase of my plan was engaging. I closed my eyes and pictured it. At my condo in the Gold Coast, the service elevator was locked open. The team from Junk Luggers was stepping off. They were not the careful movers my mother had envisioned, the ones who wrap china in tissue paper and treat furniture like heirlooms. These were the erasers I had given them, a simple directive. Everything goes, I imagined the foreman. A guy named Mike, who I had tipped $500 in advance, unlocking the door with the code I provided. He would walk into the silent apartment, the early morning light just starting to bleed through the floor-to-ceiling windows. He would see the white leather sofa, the one Kyle had christened with beer and muddy boots. He would not see a $5,000 Italian import. He would see a heavy object that needed to be gone. The crew would move fast, like a swarm of locusts. They would start with the big pieces. The sofa would be hoisted up and carried out, unceremoniously, shoved into the freight elevator, along with the walnut dining table. My mother had hated so much, they would strip the bedrooms. The mattress Jasmine had dreamed of sleeping on would be wrapped in plastic and hauled away. The custom headboard, the bedside tables, the ergonomic chair in my office, it was all just debris. Now I took another sip of champagne, feeling the engines of the plane begin to hum, a low vibration that traveled up my spine. Back at the condo, they would be clearing the kitchen. The high-end blender, the espresso machine, the set of Japanese knives I had bought for myself as a Christmas present 3 years ago. All of it was being swept into industrial bins. The refrigerator would be emptied, the shelves wiped down until they gleamed with a sterile chemical shine. They would go into the closets and take the clothes I had left behind, the coats and shoes that Jasmine was probably already planning outfits around. They would bag them up like trash, destined for a donation center on the other side of the city. By the time my sister woke up to start her day, her new wardrobe would be halfway to a Salvation Army loading dock. I checked my watch again, 6:30. The plane was pushing back from the gate. My family was probably waking up right now. My mother was likely making coffee, humming to herself, thinking about how smart she was. She was probably telling Otis to hurry up and get the truck ready. She was imagining the look on Jasmine's face when she walked into my apartment and claimed her inheritance. They were so excited, they had no idea they were driving toward a vacuum. I looked out the window as the plane taxied the tarmac, gray and wet under the winter sky. I thought about the envelope. I had moved it right before I left. The kitchen island was being removed, so I couldn't leave it there. I had placed it dead center in the middle of the living room floor. It was a heavy manila envelope taped securely to the hardwood with blue painter's tape, so the cleaning crew would know not to touch it. It was the only thing that would remain in the entire 2,000 square foot space inside. That envelope was the autopsy of their betrayal. It held the credit report showing the $20,000 of identity theft. It held the termination letter from Kyle's last job, detailing his petty theft. It held the final notice from the gambling commission. But more importantly, it held the bill of sale. The document that proved the condo did not belong to me anymore. It belonged to a shell company owned by Marcus. And Marcus did not care about family. Marcus cared about eviction schedules and trespassing laws. The plane accelerated the force, pressing me back into the seat. I watched Chicago tilt and fall away, the skyscrapers turning into toys, the lake becoming a vast gray sheet. I imagined the cleaning crew finishing up. It would be approaching 9 a.m. by the time they were done. They would sweep the floors, vacuum the carpets until the lines were straight and perfect. They would wipe every counter, every windowsill, every doorknob. When they walked out and locked the door behind them, the apartment would be unrecognizable. It would not be a home, it would be a void. No furniture to sit on, no bed to sleep in, no TV to watch, no food to eat. Just 4 white walls, a floor, and a ceiling, enclosing a silence so loud it would ring in their ears. And in the middle of that vast, empty floor, that single envelope waiting like a landmine. The pilot came over the intercom announcing our flight time and the weather in Doha where I would connect. It was going to be 80 degrees and sunny. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. I had one last thing to do before we reached cruising altitude, and I vanished completely. I opened the family group chat. It was silent. The last message was from Jasmine, sent last night, a string of heart emojis and house keys. I did not type a message. I did not send a scathing takedown or a tearful goodbye. I simply left the group, then I powered the phone down completely, holding the power button until the screen went black. I was gone. The Zola. They knew the Zola? They used the Zola they stole from was dead. She died in that cold kitchen when she realized her mother loved a credit limit more than a daughter. The woman in seat 1A was someone new, someone rich, someone free, someone who was about to order another glass of champagne and sleep for 14 hours without worrying about a single thing. Below me, the cleaning crew was loading the last of my life into a truck. The door to Unit 4B clicked shut, locking in the emptiness. The stage was set. The props were removed. All that was left was for the actors to arrive and realize they were in the wrong play. I closed my eyes and let the hum of the jet engines lull me into the first peaceful sleep I had known in 10 years. Let them come. Let them turn the key. Let them walk into the nothingness. I was already gone. I closed my eyes in the first-class cabin, letting the hum of the jet engines vibrate through my bones, 6 miles above the Atlantic Ocean. Back in Chicago, it was 10 o'clock in the morning. Winter sun would be bright and blinding, reflecting off the snow piles on the sidewalk, creating a false sense of cheer. I could see the scene unfolding in my mind's eye with the clarity of a 4K security feed. I knew my family. I knew their rhythms, their vices, and their arrogance better than I knew the tax code. I knew exactly how they would approach the building. The U-Haul truck would be idling in the loading zone, double parked because Kyle considered traffic laws to be suggestions rather than rules. He would be behind the wheel, revving the engine unnecessarily, wearing sunglasses despite the gray sky, feeling like the king of the Gold Coast. Jasmine would be in the passenger seat, scrolling through Pinterest, looking at nursery designs for the baby. She had not conceived yet, planning how to spend the money she had not earned. My parents, Otis and Beatrice, would be in their sedan parked right behind the truck. Beatrice would be out on the sidewalk, directing traffic, pointing at the building like she had built it herself, brick by brick. She would be wearing her fur coat, the one she bought with the credit card she stole from me, telling anyone who walked by that her daughter was moving in, that they were upgrading. They would approach the lobby doors with a swagger that made my skin crawl. They had the fob I had left them, the little black plastic disc that granted access to the kingdom. Jasmine would tap it against the sensor, expecting the satisfying beep and the click of the lock. But there would be no beep. I had deactivated that fob at 8 o'clock that morning, remotely through the building management portal. I had reported it lost and stolen, which technically was the truth since they were trying to steal my property. Jasmine would tap it again, harder. She would frown, wiping the sensor with her sleeve. thinking it was just cold or dirty. She would look back at Kyle, who was leaning out of the truck window. "It is not working," she would yell. Kyle would roll his eyes, muttering about cheap technology. He would jump down from the truck, leaving the engine running, and try it himself. He would mash the fob against the reader using his brute force, as if he could bully the electrons into submission. Nothing. The light on the reader would stay, a stubborn, angry red. Beatrice would march over, then her heels clicking on the pavement. "Let me do it," she would say, snatching the fob. "You two do not know how to handle these luxury systems." She would try. Gracefully at first. Then, with increasing frantic energy, she would wave it, tap it, rub it, but the door would remain locked, a heavy glass barrier between them and the life they thought they had won. By now the doorman would have noticed. Usually it would be Henry, a nice older man who knew me. But I knew the schedule. Today was a Saturday morning. It was the new guy, Kevin. Kevin followed the rules. Kevin did not know my mother, and he certainly did not know Kyle. Kevin would step out of the booth, his face stern. "Can I help you folks? You need to clear that truck. You are blocking the entrance. We live here," Beatrice would snap, drawing herself up to her full height. "My daughter Zola Williams owns Unit 4B. We are moving in." "I am sorry, Ma-am," Kevin would say, checking his clipboard. "I do not have any move-in scheduled for today, and Unit 4B is listed as vacant." Vacant. Jasmine would laugh, a high-pitched, nervous sound. "No, you are mistaken. My sister just left for London. She gave us the keys. We are the new tenants. I need you to step away from the door." Kevin would say, his hand drifting toward his radio. "This is ridiculous." Beatrice would huff, digging into her purse for her phone. "I am calling Zola. She will straighten this out." She would dial my number, expecting me to pick up on the first ring, expecting me to apologize profusely and call the building management to demand they let her in. She would expect me to fix it because I had always fixed it. But the phone would not ring. It would go straight to a pre-recorded message. "The subscriber you have dialed is currently unavailable." She would call again and again, her frustration turning to a cold prickle of fear. While she was redialing, Kyle would get impatient. He was not a man who handled delays well. He would walk around to the side of the building to the residence entrance where the keypad was. I had told them the code was under the mat inside, but they could not get inside to get it. I pictured him trying to force the door, jiggling the handle, looking for a weakness. He would see a maintenance worker exiting and catch the door before it closed, slipping inside with Jasmine and Beatrice close on his heels. They would rush to the elevator, pressing the button for the 4th floor, feeling clever, feeling triumphant. They had beaten the doorman. They were inside. When the elevator doors opened on the 4th floor, they would stride down the hallway to number 4B. Beatrice would be muttering about getting Kevin fired. Kyle would be talking about how he was going to mount the TV. They would reach my door. The welcome mat would be there, just like I promised. Jasmine would kneel down and flip it over. Her fingers would brush the cold floor. There would be a key. It was the key I had left them, the brass key to the deadlock. "See," Jasmine would say, holding it up victoriously. "She just forgot to update the fob. Building management is incompetent. Zola left the key right here." She would slide the key into the lock. It would fit perfectly. She would turn it, but the bolt would not slide. I had changed the lock core myself 2 days ago. The key I left them was the old key. It fit the hole, but it would not turn the mechanism. It was a dummy, a prop. Jasmine would twist it harder, grunting with effort. "It is stuck. Let me." Kyle would shove her aside, grabbing the key. He would wrench it back and forth, rattling the door in its frame. "Open up!" He would growl as if the door were an employee. He could intimidate. Beatrice would be pacing behind them, her anxiety spiking. "This does not make sense." She said she left everything ready. "Why is nothing working?" Otis, who had finally parked the car and come up, would be standing by the elevator looking worried. "Maybe we should call a locksmith," he would suggest. "No." Locksmith. Beatrice would snap. "We are not paying for a locksmith. Zola should have taken care of this." And then the door would open. But it would not be because Kyle forced it, and it would not be because the key finally worked. The door would swing inward, pulled open from the inside. My family would stumble forward, momentum carrying them toward the threshold, expecting to see my white leather sofa and my city view. Instead, they would see a wall of gray wool. A man would be standing in the doorway, filling the frame. He would be tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a suit that cost more than Kyle's life. He would not be smiling. Behind him, two uniformed Chicago police officers would be standing with their hands resting casually on their belts. The apartment behind them would be visible over the man's shoulder. It was empty, completely barren. The white walls reflected the winter light. The floors were bare, hardwood stripped of rugs and furniture. There was no sofa, no TV, no life, just a hollow, echoing box, and in the center of the room, taped to the floor, was the single manila envelope. The man in the suit would look down at Kyle, who was still holding the useless brass key. "Can I help you?" The man would ask, his voice deep and authoritative. "We are moving in." Beatrice would blurt out, trying to peer around him. "Where is the furniture? Where is Zola?" "I am afraid you are mistaken," the man would say, stepping forward, forcing them to retreat into the hallway. "This unit is private property. It belongs to my daughter." Beatrice would scream, losing her composure entirely. "Zola Williams. She owns this condo. She gave it to us." The man would not blink. He would reach into his jacket pocket and pull out a folded document. He would snap it open, presenting it to them like a warrant. "This unit is the property of Apex Capital Holdings," he would say calmly. "The sale was finalized yesterday. The previous owner, Ms. Williams, vacated the premises this morning. The unit is empty." "Sale." Jasmine would whisper the word, choking her. "Sold, yes, sold," the man would say. "Closing was completed. Funds were transferred. We took possession at 9 a.m. "No," Beatrice would shake her head, backing away. "No, she would not. She is going to London. She needed us to watch the place. She gave us the BMW. "The BMW?" the man would ask, raising an eyebrow. "Is that the vehicle parked in the loading zone? The rental?" Kyle would say, his voice cracking. "That is a 5 Series. "It is a Hertz rental," the man would say, checking a clipboard. "The plates match a report we received. The rental agreement expired at 8 a.m. It has been reported as overdue." The police officers would step forward, then their faces impassive. "We received a call about a potential trespassing situation," one officer would say, looking at Kyle. "You folks want to explain why you are trying to break into a corporate-owned unit. We have a key," Beatrice would shriek, brandishing the useless piece of brass. "My daughter gave us a key. She said we could live here. She lied to us. She must be confused." The man in the suit would look at them with a mixture of pity and boredom. "She seemed very clear when she signed the deed." He would say, "She requested a quick close. Cash only. She said she was liquidating everything, moving on." "Liquidating," Jasmine would moan, leaning against the wall for support. "My house, my baby. Room. It was never your house," I thought from my seat in the sky. "It was never your room." The officer would look at the U-Haul truck parked outside, visible through the hallway window. "You need to move that truck," he would say. "And you need to vacate the premises immediately, or we will have to arrest you for trespassing. But we have nowhere to go." Kyle would shout, panic finally setting in. "We gave up our apartment. We have all our stuff in that truck. That is a civil matter," the officer would say, not unkindly. "You need to leave. This building is private property." Beatrice would frantically dial my number again and again, screaming into the voicemail. "Zola, pick up. Pick up right now. You tell them. You tell them. This is my house. You tell them. You did not sell it." "Where are you, Zola?" But I was 30,000 feet above the ocean, sipping a mimosa, watching a movie. I was unreachable. I was a ghost. The man in the suit would step back into the apartment, preparing to close the door. But before he did, he would reach down and pick up the envelope from the floor. "Ms. Williams left this," he would say, holding it out. "It is addressed to the family." Beatrice would snatch it from his hand, tearing it open with savage claws. She would pull out the papers, the final notice for the gambling debt, the credit report showing the identity theft, the printout of Kyle's termination letter. She would stare at them, her eyes scanning the lines, her brain trying to compute the magnitude of the disaster. "This is..." Nothing, she would whisper. "This is lies." "It looks like documentation to me," the man would say. And with that, he would close the door. The deadbolt would slide home with a final definitive thunk. My family would be left standing in the hallway, holding a bag of trash and a useless key. They would be homeless, they would be exposed, and they would be alone. Beatrice would look at Otis, waiting for him to fix it, waiting for him to tell her it was a bad dream. But Otis would be staring at the credit report in her hand, reading the numbers, seeing his wife's name listed as the fraudster. He would look at her, and for the first time she would see no love in his eyes, only fear. Kyle would be reading the gambling notice, his face gray. Jasmine would be looking at him, realizing that the tech incubator was a roulette wheel. The police officer would clear his throat. "Move it along, folks. The truck needs to go." They would walk down the hall, the sound of their footsteps heavy and slow. They would take the elevator, down in silence. When they walked out into the cold Chicago morning, the wind would hit them like a physical blow. The U-Haul would be sitting there, a monument to their greed, filled with furniture they had no place to put. They would stand on the curb, shivering, while the doorman, Kevin, watched them with a small, satisfied smile. Beatrice would try to call me one last time. She would scream into the phone, cursing my name, calling me ungrateful, calling me a devil. But the devil was not listening. The devil was on vacation, and they were in hell. The air in Maui smelled different than Chicago. It smelled of hibiscus flowers, salt water, and the expensive coconut sunscreen I had just slathered on my legs. I was lying on a teak lounge chair. The white sand of Wailea Beach, stretching out in front of me like a blank canvas. The ocean was a shade of turquoise that looked photoshopped, calm and rhythmic, licking at the shore with a gentle hush that was the exact opposite of the chaos I had left behind. Waiter in a white linen shirt appeared at my elbow, placing a frosted glass on the side table. It was a Mai Tai, the condensation beeping down the side, a wedge of fresh pineapple perched on the rim. "Thank you," I said, sliding my sunglasses down my nose to look at him. He smiled and walked away, leaving me alone in my paradise. I took a sip. The rum was dark and sweet, warming my chest. I closed my eyes and listened to the wind in the palm trees. For a moment, I allowed myself to just be. Zola the tourist, Zola the woman with no history and no baggage. But the moment passed quickly. The curiosity was an itch I had to scratch. I reached into my beach bag and pulled out my phone. It was a sleek black slab, cool to the touch. I had turned it off the moment I stepped onto the plane in Chicago, 14 hours ago. It had been a brick of silence, a promise of peace. I pressed the power button. The screen lit up, the white Apple logo glowing for a few seconds before the home screen appeared. And then the phone exploded. It did not make a sound because I had kept it on silent, but it vibrated so violently in my hand it felt like a living thing fighting to escape. It buzzed and buzzed and buzzed, a continuous angry spasm. Notifications cascading down the screen in a waterfall of panic. I placed it on the table and watched it dance, rattling against the glass. 80 missed calls, 150 text messages, 27 voicemails. The numbers were staggering, a testament to the absolute meltdown occurring 4,000 miles away. I took another sip of my Mai Tai and watched the notifications stack up, detached and clinical. It was like watching a stock market crash in real time. Knowing you had already shorted the market, I unlocked the screen and opened the messaging app. The first few texts were from 10 a.m. Chicago time, They were confused, annoyed. From Jasmine. Where is the key? The fob is not working. Zola. Answer your phone. From Kyle. This is ridiculous. We are blocking traffic. Call the doorman. From Beatrice. Pick up Zola. We are freezing out here. This is not funny. I scrolled down. The timestamps shifted to 10:30, 10:45. The tone shifted from annoyance to rage. From Jasmine. Why did you change the locks? Are you trying to teach us a lesson? Just let us in. From Beatrice. I am going to call your father. He is furious. Zola, you are embarrassing us in front of the neighbors. Then came 11 a.m. The moment the door opened. The moment the man in the suit delivered the news. From Kyle. Who is this guy? He says he owns the place. Zola, what did you do? From Jasmine. They are telling us to leave. They are saying you sold it. You did not sell it. You gave it to us. Tell them you gave it to us. From Beatrice. Answer the phone right now. Zola Williams. I scrolled further down. The panic set in around noon. From Kyle. The cops are here. They are threatening to tow the truck. Zola. Please, I have nowhere to put this stuff. We gave up the lease. From Jasmine. My baby S room. You sold my baby S room. How could you be so evil? From Beatrice. You are a liar and a thief. You promised us this home, and then the most recent one sent just minutes ago. Desperate and terrified. From Kyle. The collection agency found out. I moved. They called my mom. They know I am not at the old address. Zola, you have to help me. If they find me, I am dead. Do you hear me? Dead. From Jasmine. Mom is hyperventilating. We are sitting in a diner parking lot with a U-Haul full of furniture and nowhere to go. Why do you hate us so much? From Otis. Zola. Please, just call us. We can fix this. I read them all, feeling a cold satisfaction settle in my gut. They were not asking for forgiveness. They were not apologizing for stealing my identity or trying to mooch off my success. They were only sorry they had been caught. They were only sorry the free ride had hit a wall. I opened the voicemail tab. The first one was from Beatrice. Her voice was high and shrill, cracking with hysteria. Zola. I do not know what kind of sick game you are playing. But it ends now. You tell that man to let us in. This is my house. Do you hear me? My house. You ungrateful child. I raised you better than this. The next one was from Kyle. He sounded like he was crying. Zola. Look, man. I'm sorry about the sofa. Okay, I will clean it. Just tell them to let us in. I cannot be out on the street. The bookie. He has guys looking for me. If they see the U-Haul, they will know I have no place to go. Please. Zola, I am begging you. I listened to a few more. Hearing the progression of their day, the slow, dawning realization that there was no fix coming, that there was no Zola coming to save them. I deleted the voicemails one by one, clearing the space. I could have called them. I could have picked up the phone and screamed at them, told them exactly why I did it. I could have engaged in the drama, let them hear my voice and my anger, but that would have given them something. It would have given them my energy. It would have given them a target. Silence was louder. Silence was a mirror forcing them to look at themselves. I opened my email app. It was time for the final blow. The nail in the coffin. I had drafted the email days ago, sitting in my office while Kyle drank my beer, and Jasmine tagged my art. It was saved in my drafts folder, ready to be deployed. I opened it and checked the recipient list. To Beatrice Williams, Otis Williams, Jasmine Williams, Kyle Davis, CC, Auntie May, Uncle Ron, Cousin Tasha, the deacon, Board of Greater Ebenezer Baptist Church, Pastor Franklin. I added every single person my mother tried to impress. Every person she had bragged to about her successful daughter and her new condo in the Gold Coast. I was not just burning the bridge, I was salting the earth. Subject RE. The condo, the debt, and the truth. I took a deep breath, the ocean air filling my lungs, and hit edit, adding one final attachment. The photo of the U-Haul standing forlornly on the curb that the doorman Kevin had texted me earlier that morning. Then I read it through one last time, dear family and friends. By now you have realized that the keys under the mat did not open the door to a new life. They opened the door to the reality you have been avoiding for years. To clarify, yes, I sold the condo. The deed was transferred yesterday morning. The funds are in my possession, and I am currently thousands of miles away, enjoying them. You are not the victims of a clerical error. You are the victims of your own greed. I overheard your conversation at Christmas. I heard you planning to move into my home to kick me out to paint over my life. I heard you calling me selfish while plotting to live off my labor. But that was not the reason I did this. I did this because of what I found when I looked into why you needed the house so badly. Kyle, I have attached your termination letter from your last job, the one that details the embezzlement. And I have attached the final notice from the Gambling Commission regarding your $50,000 debt. You are not an entrepreneur. You are a liability. And now, everyone knows it. Mom and Dad, I have attached a credit report. This report shows a credit card opened in my name 10 years ago using my social security number. It shows $20,000 in charges ranging from Jasmine's tuition to her designer handbags to your vacations. You stole my identity. You committed fraud against your own daughter to fund the lifestyle of your favorite child. I paid off the card yesterday with the proceeds from the condo sale. Consider it my final gift to you. The debt is gone, but so am I. I have filed a police report regarding the identity theft. I have also notified the credit bureaus. If any of you try to open so much as a library card in my name, again the authorities will be notified immediately. The condo was the price of my freedom. The money I made from selling it is the reimbursement for the childhood you stole and the credit score you ruined. Do not look for me. Do not call me. Do not email me. I have changed my number and my email. Address will be deactivated after this message sends Jasmine. You wanted my life. You wanted my house, my car, my furniture. You can have the empty space where they used to be. You can have the reality of a husband who lied to you and parents who stole for you. Good luck, Pastor Franklin. I am copying you on this because my mother loves to talk about her blessings in church. I thought you should see exactly how those blessings were acquired. Goodbye, Zola. I hovered my finger over the send button. I looked at the ocean, the waves crashing endlessly against the shore. The world was so big and my family was so small. I thought about the little girl who sat at the kitchen table begging for a student loan. I thought about the woman who worked 80-hour weeks, only to be called selfish. I thought about the white leather sofa and the beer stain. I tapped the screen. Sent. The email whooshed away, disappearing into the digital ether, flying across the ocean to land like a bomb in a diner parking lot in Chicago. I put the phone down on the table, face down. I picked up my Mai Tai and took a long, slow sip. The ice clinked against the glass. A cheerful sound. I lay back on the lounge chair and closed my eyes, adjusting my sunglasses to block out the glare. My phone vibrated once. A notification that the email had been delivered. Then it vibrated again. And again, I reached out and slid the little switch on the side, turning it off completely. The buzzing stopped. The only sound left was the wind in the palms and the ocean rolling in, cleaning the sand, erasing the footprints, making everything new. I was Zola. And I was finally home. The phone was still vibrating against the teak table, a frantic mechanical dance that mirrored the chaos unfolding 4,000 miles away in a frozen Chicago parking lot. 80 missed calls, 150 texts and voicemails that were filling up my cloud storage faster than I could delete them. I did not answer a single one. I did not decline them, I simply let them ring a soundtrack to the final act of my liberation. I sat up on the lounge chair, adjusting the shade of the umbrella so it covered my laptop screen. The tropical sun was relentless, but my focus was colder than the ice melting in my glass. I had one last piece of business to conduct before I could truly disappear. One final audit that would close the books on the Williams family legacy. Forever I opened my email client. The draft I had written on the plane was sitting there waiting. It was not a letter. It was a report. A forensic accounting of 20 years of emotional and financial abuse. I clicked edit and added the final recipients to Beatrice Williams, Otis Williams, Jasmine Williams, Kyle Davis. But I did not stop there. I added the blind carbon copy recipients. This was the nuclear option, the scorched earth policy that would ensure my mother could never spin this narrative into one of her victim stories. BCC, Pastor Franklin, of Greater Mount Zion Church, the Deacon Board, the President of the Women's Auxiliary, the Ladies of the Bridge Club, Auntie May, Uncle Ron, and every single cousin who had been at the party last night, eating my food and celebrating my exile. My mother lived for her reputation. She fed on the admiration of her church community. She wore her status like armor. Today, I was going to strip her naked in front of the congregation. Subject regarding the sale of Unit 4B, the debts and the termination of our relationship. I took a breath, the salty air filling my lungs, and began to type the final addendums. Dear family and friends, by now you are standing on the sidewalk realizing that the keys under the mat do not open the door to your new life. They open the door to the reality you have been avoiding for decades. You are likely confused, angry, and looking for someone to blame. You are calling my phone demanding answers, demanding I fix this, demanding I let you into the home you believe you are entitled to. Let me be clear. There is no mistake. There is no misunderstanding. Attached as PDF file. 1. You will find the closing statement for the sale of my condo. The transaction was finalized yesterday morning. The sale price was $400,000. The funds have been wired and the deed has been transferred to a holding company owned by Apex Capital. The locks have been changed. The unit is empty, and you are trespassing. I sold it because I overheard your conversation at Christmas dinner. I heard you planning to push me out. I heard you dividing up my furniture. I heard you erasing me from my own life to make room for Jasmine's fantasies. You called me selfish for having a guest room. You called me cold for working hard. You thought I was a resource to be harvested. But selling the house was not just about spite. It was about liquidity. Because when I looked into why you needed my home so desperately, I found the rot beneath the floorboards. Kyle, please reference attachment 2. It is your termination letter from your last employer detailing your dismissal for embezzlement of company funds, specifically office equipment and petty cash. Below that, you will find the final demand notice from the Online Gambling Commission regarding your $50,000 debt. You are not an entrepreneur. You are not a visionary. You are a liability who has gambled away your family's security. My parents wanted me to house you to hide you from your creditors. I have saved you the trouble by paying off your former employer to prevent them from pressing charges. Consider that my wedding gift to you 2 years late. I paused, looking out at the turquoise water, imagining Kyle's face as he read that on his phone in the U-Haul truck. The shame would be burning him alive. I continued typing, my fingers flying across the keys. Mom and Dad, Jasmine. This next part is for you. And it is the most important part. Please reference Attachment 3. This is a comprehensive credit report generated 3 days ago under my Social Security number. For years you have told me I was the lucky one, the one who had it easy, the one who did not need help. You told me I was selfish for not sharing my success. You told me Jasmine needed support because she was just starting out, but the truth is much uglier. 10 years ago, when I was struggling to pay for my own tuition, when I was eating instant noodles and working 3 jobs because you refused to co-sign a loan, you stole my identity. The report clearly shows a credit card opened in my name, the week of Thanksgiving, 2014. It lists Beatrice Williams as the authorized user. The card was maxed out almost immediately. The charges are all there, highlighted in yellow. Tuition for Jasmine's art school in New York. The one she dropped out of flights to Miami for spring break. Designer handbags. Furniture for your house. Spa treatments. You ran up a debt of $150,000 in my name over the last decade. You made minimum payments to keep it off the radar, just enough to keep the collectors away, but not enough to ever pay it down. You tanked my debt-to-income ratio. You anchored me to a financial rock I did not even know I was carrying. You stole my future to fund Jasmine's present. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, not from sadness, but from the sheer relief of finally saying it out loud, of finally putting the evidence on the table where they could not gaslight it away. I wiped the tear away and kept typing. You might be wondering where the money from the condo sale went. You might be thinking that $400,000 is a nice nest egg for me to start over with. It is not. I used the proceeds from the sale of my home to pay off the debt you created. Every single cent of the $150,000 plus interest and penalties has been paid to the creditors. The account is closed. The debt is gone. I sold my house to buy back my name. The condo was the price of my freedom. The money was the ransom for the identity you stole. So no, I did not abandon you. I emancipated myself, and to ensure this never happens again, please reference Attachment 4. This is a copy of the police report filed yesterday morning with the Chicago Police Department Financial Crimes Division, case number 89442B. The report details the identity theft, the fraudulent accounts, and the unauthorized use of my Social Security number. I have also filed a fraud alert with all 3 major credit bureaus. Here is the deal. I have not pressed charges yet. The report is filed, but I have declined to prosecute at this time on one condition. You never contact me again. If you try to call me, if you try to email me, if you show up at my workplace, if you try to open so much as a library card in my name, the suspension on that police report will be lifted. The evidence is already with the district attorney. It is a slam dunk case, Mom. You and Dad will go to prison for fraud, Jasmine. You will be named as an accessory since you knowingly benefited from the stolen funds. This is not a negotiation. This is a restraining order signed in ink and cash. Do not look for me. I have resigned from my job. I have sold my car. I have vacated my apartment. I am not in London. I am not anywhere. You can reach Jasmine. You wanted my life. You wanted my apartment, my furniture, my car. You can have the empty space where they used to be. You can have the reality of a husband who lies to you and parents who steal for you. You can have the legacy of fraud that is the only inheritance this family has left. Pastor Franklin and the deacon board, I am copying you because my mother loves to stand in the front pew and talk about how the Lord provides. I thought you should see exactly whose bank account the Lord has been using. It was not a miracle. It was a felony. I am done being the bank. I am done being the doormat. I am done being the daughter you settle for. I am Zola, and I am free. Goodbye. I stared at the screen. The cursor blinked at the end of the final sentence waiting. It was a button press that would destroy my family. It would humiliate them, destroy their social standing, and leave them financially ruined. They deserved it. They had tried to eat me alive, and now they were going to choke on the bones. I moved my cursor to the send button. My hand was steady. My heart was slow and calm. I clicked. Sent. The message vanished from my screen, swooping away into the digital ether. It was traveling at the speed of light, bouncing off satellites racing toward the frozen streets of Chicago. It would land in their inboxes, with a cheerful ding, a notification that signaled the end of their world. I closed the laptop and pushed it aside. I picked up my Mai Tai, the glass sweating in the heat. I took a long, slow sip, tasting the pineapple and the rum, and the sweetness of absolute victory. Down on the beach, a group of children were playing in the surf, laughing and splashing. I watched them for a moment, feeling a strange sense of peace. I was alone. I had no home, no job, no family, but I had myself, and for the first time in 35 years, that was enough. I reached for my phone one last time. The screen was still lit up with missed calls. The number had climbed to 92. Beatrice was persistent. I would give her that. I opened the settings menu and scrolled down to the bottom. I found the option I was looking for. Change number. I confirmed the selection. The phone went dark for a moment, then rebooted with a fresh, clean slate. No contacts, no history, no voicemails. Just a factory default screen, waiting for a new life to be written on it. I set the phone down and laid back, closing my eyes against the brilliant sun. I listened to the ocean. Somewhere in Chicago, a phone was dinging. A woman in a fur coat was screaming in a parking lot. A man in a bomber jacket was realizing he was out of options. A sister was learning that the golden child is just the first one to be sacrificed when the money runs out. But here in the Maldives, the wind was warm and the water was blue. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with air that belonged only to me. I was Zola, and I was finally debt-free. This story teaches a brutal but necessary truth. Shared DNA is not a license for exploitation. Zola's journey reveals that true peace often requires the courage to sever toxic ties even with family. It highlights the critical importance of financial independence and documentation as armor against manipulation. We learn that keeping the peace should never come at the cost of your dignity, credit score, or mental health. Ultimately, the greatest act of self-love is refusing to set yourself on fire just to keep ungrateful people warm. Zola proves that calculated silence and strategy are far more powerful than noise. If you've ever had to audit your own life to find your freedom, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice served cold.